so good morning everybody and welcome to the 49th meeting of the Economy Committee. Some more members will be attending this morning's meeting via video conference and our witnesses will be briefing via video conference also. Just to remind members, the meeting will be broadcast live when open to the public, and a recording will be made available on the committee's web pages on the Assembly website. And just to remind members to mute their tablet devices when they're not speaking. So moving on then to item number 1, apologies, we don't have any apologies this morning?
Not this morning.
Okay, moving on then to item number 2, which is our draft minutes. There is a copy of the draft minutes from the meeting held on the 27th of January at page 5 of your packs. Are members content that those are an accurate reflection of the meeting?
Great.
Thank you.
Then at page 10 of your packs there is a copy of the draft record of decisions from the meeting held on the 27th that were carried over then for correspondence. So are members content that those are an accurate record?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then moving on, there is a copy of the draft minutes from the meeting held yesterday at page 3 of your table papers. Are members content that those are an accurate record of the meeting?
Great, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So moving on then to item number 3, which is Chair's business. At page 14 of your pack, there is a proposal from FSB for a furlough cost support scheme. So the purpose of the proposal is to ensure that employers are assisted in keeping furloughed workers employed to benefit businesses and the local economy. Employers have obviously been incurring the costs of administering the furlough scheme for the workforce in terms of covering pension contributions and national insurance. And obviously this is an added burden to businesses. So are members content that we forward this document to the Minister?
Yeah, Chair, I think we would welcome it. Something I suppose a lot of us weren't fully aware of, the burden that businesses are carrying in relation to their staff that are on the furlough scheme because of a lot of overheads to meet. And, it is a good document. I had a chance to look at it. And I think, we'll be fully supportive, and hopefully the Executive will see fit to at least get some funding that will help the businesses that are struggling and have to continue to meet overheads, and of course to encourage them to keep their staff on as long as possible as we try and work our way out of this pandemic.
Yeah, so are members content that we forward that to the Economy and Finance Minister?
Great.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Chair, sorry for connection today. Chair, can I come in?
Yeah, go ahead, Sinead.
Regarding the FSB paper, I think it's very important.
Sinead, we can't hear you. Can you hear us? We'll come back to Sinead on that point. Okay, so we move on then to item number 4, which is our departmental briefing on the COVID-19 financial support schemes. There is a clerk's memo at page 18 of your pack. There is the statement from the Minister for Finance on January monitoring at page 20 of your pack, and then there is the departmental briefing papers on the January monitoring round at page 41 of your pack. And just to draw members' attention to page 78 of the pack, which is the departmental response regarding a query from the Finance Committee on the COVID-19 business support schemes operated by DFE. The response includes an outline of the schemes followed by a table giving an overview of the schemes developed by the department, which is relevant to this briefing. So the committee the committee agreed to seek an urgent update on the department's COVID relief measures following the January monitoring briefing and as a result of the approach of the end of the financial year. So if I could bring into the spotlight this morning Paul Grocott from the Economic Strategy Group and Keith Forster, also from Economic Strategy.
Chair, there's also a departmental sit rep that I emailed out to members this morning. So that should be in their inboxes, and that's probably also very useful for this briefing if they want to have a look at it.
Okay, so Paul, if I hand over to yourself, can you bring the officials into the spotlight, please?
Paul Grocott and Keith Forster.
There you go. Morning, Paul. Keith, if I hand over to yourselves to give us maybe a bit of an opening briefing, and then we'll open it up to members.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Just check you can hear me okay. My connection's coming up, it says it's unstable.
Yeah, we.
Perfect, okay. Let me know if it drops out and I can try it. I was just going to provide a very short overview. I was expecting members' questions was probably going to be how you want to use most of the time. So just a very quick overview, hopefully not too repetitive of the information that you've got in your packs. So that the current position that we're in is the department has provided around £365 million worth of essential support into the economy. So that, in scheme terms, that is the delivery of both the £10,000 and the £20,000 grant scheme on top of the hardship scheme, which reached just over 30,000 businesses. We now have 6 schemes that are live, and just to go through them individually, just the names only, is the COVID restrictions business support scheme, the newly self-employed support scheme, a scheme for limited company directors, the large tourism and hospitality business scheme, a scheme for wet pubs, and then finally the B&B guest houses and guest accommodation scheme. In addition to those schemes, as we've spoken previously about bringing forward a stimulus package for the high street, given the current position of the restrictions and the shops being closed, it's not been possible to do that now, but the Minister is committed to bringing forward that scheme and doing what it says on the tin is providing that much needed stimulus into our high streets that have been really badly affected. So if we look across the schemes and what we've delivered, I think as a minimum we could say that we've matched the support across the UK, but in many cases we've gone further. So as an example, the newly self-employed scheme brings in more people than similar schemes across other regions in GB, and also the grant payment is higher. We're the only region, as far as we're aware, to bring forward a scheme for limited company directors, and also it's the scheme, the Part B of CBSS, which supports businesses not in premises, is relatively unique. So across the piece, there's a unprecedented level of support. We recognise there remain gaps, which I'm sure questions will sort of get into in the short term. But the provision of 365 million, the ongoing delivery of 6 schemes, has been instrumental in protecting the economy, and it's sort of, the Minister has consistently pointed out, and we're keen to sort of articulate as well, is that hopefully now with the rollout of the vaccine, we've positioned the economy in the strongest possible place to pivot towards recovery, and we'll see more activity focused on economic recovery rather than the life support, which is at the moment essential. So that was always what I was going to cover at the start. Like I said, I was expecting members to be keen to get into questions.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. And it's useful to get, I suppose, the overview there as a starting point. And obviously the committee is very aware of the number of schemes that are currently ongoing, and of the work, obviously, of the department and officials in terms of delivering those is quite significant. Now, you did mention yourself that there are still some gaps in those schemes, and obviously the committee has been made aware of those by various individuals and groups in relation to where there are those gaps and where support is still needed. And I suppose with the additional funding still available at the centre in terms of the COVID allocations, that there is perhaps potential to explore further schemes or further, I suppose, amendments of current schemes in the absence of any additional schemes. But what would your view be in terms of being able to put in, first of all, in place an additional scheme? We've heard calls for example, to open up for those who have been excluded from other schemes. Is that something that you think the department would be open to considering and to be able to deliver?
Yeah, so as a just general clarification, so decisions on the COVID money that's been allocated for spending in this year is for the executive. So there's ongoing conversations. So you had the briefing from the finance colleagues a couple of weeks ago now, I think, on how the department's contributing towards meeting those underspends. Those discussions are ongoing, both within the department and then between departments to facilitate those executive level decisions. The challenge with new schemes is that they are complicated and take time to deliver. So there's an inevitable pressure, given the nature of the accountancy treatment of the funding, whether it's possible to deliver those schemes in year. But as I mentioned, there's ongoing conversations internally. We've received, I think, the same representations that the committee has received on areas of support where key stakeholders think that there is merit in sort of money being allocated. So we'll consider them, provide advice to the Minister, and then it's for the Executive to decide both how the money is allocated, but importantly, how the resourcing is provided to deliver those schemes.
Yeah. And last week we had a response from the Finance Minister, which indicated that the Executive had agreed to give the Economy Minister some flexibility to reallocate money within the department to be able to spend it on COVID supports between now and the end of the year. But I seen yesterday in the allocations that were made by the Finance Minister, there was a reduced requirement for the newly self-employed scheme. And obviously that is an area that has been highlighted to us as having some gaps in the current support, and there are some of those who are newly self-employed since 2019 who have been excluded from the scheme as it currently stands. Has any consideration been given to expanding the criteria of the current scheme to be able to support some of those still excluded from that?
So on the specifics of the newly self-employed, so the committee will be aware from the briefing pack that we provided. The level of support that's provided at 3,500 is more generous than what's available of comparable schemes in Scotland or Wales, which are at sort of £2,000 or £2,500. So that the scheme in itself is already providing a more generous grant payment. In addition, for the cohort that the scheme is designed to support, we've previously spoke about the 50-50 rule, which we adapted the scheme to bring in more people in. So the scheme is already, we think, quite well targeted for that sort of the purpose, that the policy intent that it was designed to achieve. I think the question that you're pointing to is whether we start to get more engaged and involved in the policy decisions that have been taken by the UK government in the design of the HMRC scheme. So the cohort of 18, 19 or perhaps even earlier, that because of the way the self-employed income support scheme has been designed, are either not receiving any grant payment or excluded. And the deeper that we go into UKG schemes and try to engage and sort of pick up their gaps, the more complicated it becomes. So it's very difficult for us to go beyond that. And I think indeed when we've had engagements with sort of key representatives from the likes of Excluded NI, for example, they recognise that, and the priority that was put to us from their perspective was to address the 19-20 cohort, and we feel we've done that.
I appreciate that has been amended in terms of bringing in that 19-20 cohort and amending the 50-50 requirement, and I think that was a positive move. I suppose we continue to be contacted by those who either missed out on the ISS because of not having met the 50% income in the 2019-20 tax year. So I suppose the question would be, is there a willingness to look at extending that support further, given that there is money there available to be allocated to support more, I suppose, of those who have yet to receive any?
So I think start with what's the objective? I guess the objective is to help these people. I think the quickest way for those people to get support would be through the HMRC scheme. So we'd be happy to for you to forward those issues that have been forwarded to us, and we can contact HMRC to make those representations, or I'm sure the clerk can provide advice on the appropriateness of you either contacting HMRC or working through colleagues in finance to make those similar points. Yep,
we can do that, absolutely. And I suppose we would just encourage the department to be open to considering any supports for those individuals who have missed out from being newly self-employed. And I guess there are a few other issues that have been highlighted to us in other schemes as well that potentially could be addressed in the time that we have, and the fact that there is money available. For example, the wet pub scheme, it has been highlighted to us that anybody who opened in any capacity misses out on the support for the week that they were opened. And there were, I suppose, bars who opened on a very small basis, a few tables outside, and who now find themselves excluded from that scheme, despite the fact that they had been, I suppose, encouraged to open up and wanted to, have some opportunity to bring in some income over that summer period, and so they took that opportunity. And I suppose if we look at the LRSS, where currently there is an ability for hospitality to do takeout services, but they're still getting the LRSS grant. So, it doesn't seem to match up that those would be excluded from the wet pub scheme on the basis that they opened on a very limited capacity for outdoor service or for takeaway. Has any kind of consideration been given to that?
So the policy intent of the wet pub scheme was specifically targeted at those that have been closed for the whole period, so didn't have that, albeit small, but I'm sure important relief during the summer period. So there's the decision of the executive was targeted at that specific population. We're happy to sort of consider that, provide advice to the minister and feed that into the executive. I don't know, Keith, is there anything on the technical design of the scheme that you'd like to add on that point?
No, Paul. The wet pub scheme is designed, as you say, to provide support for the businesses that were closed from the 4th of July into October. It is done on a compensation is for businesses that were closed on a per week basis. We are adopting an inclusive approach to that, and there are obvious inclusions for businesses that have done some takeaway services and things like that we're looking into. But by and large, the principle is if the bar was closed, the pub was closed, they were paid. If they were open in any capacity for that particular week, then they weren't.
Yeah, I guess I would encourage some flexibility around that, because there were some that were very limited in their operations, and they had just taken advantage of the fact that they were able to open if they were able to put in place an outdoor service, and it wouldn't have been in any respect equivalent to their normal service. And so they would have had very limited income, and I think it's just something that could be potentially addressed in the same way that the LRSS is allowing for that situation currently. So if that's something that could be looked at, and if that could be raised with the minister, I think it would be a welcome support to some of those businesses. I'm going to bring in some other members in for questions. John Stewart is first.
Thank you, Chair. Keith, Paul, thanks for the presentation so far and for the questions you've answered. The Chair covered a couple of my points. I want to say from the outset, I think we all acknowledge and recognise the vast level of state support and intervention for businesses, big and small here in Northern Ireland, both from the British government and from the executive. And no one is underplaying, the massive task at hand to support these. That being said, businesses still are in turmoil and are looking for all the support they can get and communication to keep them updated while their grants are being processed. Just to touch firstly on CRBSS Part A and Part B, I might have missed it during your presentation. Can you confirm that has been extended to cover the period now to the 5th of March?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Finance Minister's announcement yesterday sort of confirmed budget has been made available for grants to pay up until the 5th. Yeah.
That's for LRSS and for CRBSS, yeah? Yeah,
so LRSS is managed by LPS, and that's tied to the regulation. So as soon as the regulations extend, that automatically increases, whereas CRBSS doesn't have its own regs, so we have to bid for the money effectively, and that's been confirmed to the 5th of March, for both Part A and Part B, I should add.
Okay. One of the big issues around that, and I appreciate it's a Department of Economy-led scheme, but it's ruled out by Invest NI, and I think as we approach the start of the next phase of the restriction for these businesses, many of them are still waiting for the payment for the period from January through to now. And I appreciate there are some delays. Are you able to comment on where we're at with how it is possible that at the start of February, some businesses have applied for CRBSS Part A and Part B legitimately, haven't received the first two payments, have still not got it? It does seem really frustrating for them.
So I totally appreciate from the business perspective. So the numbers are around 50% of the applicants in Part A have been paid their top-up payment. That only runs until the 5th of February because of we were awaiting confirmation from the extra budget. So there'll be a top-up payment for those people, hopefully very quickly. And then for the Part B scheme, there's around 35% of payments of the top-up payments have been made. Similarly, we'll have to do a second top-up to bring them up to the extended periods of the 5th of March. The challenge that we face is that, and this was known from the start, is that we were running two schemes concurrently. So the LRSS paid businesses in premises, but obviously that excluded businesses that didn't have premises or were in the supply chain, which is why we developed the CRBSS. And while they've got specific populations, it was inevitable that there could be overlap, particularly as businesses perhaps weren't quite sure which scheme they were eligible for. So as we move from the first period of restrictions into the second one, it's necessary just to take stock and double check that there are no duplicate payments within the system. So Invest and I have been able to do that very quickly, around 50%. There's the remaining 50%, they're working quickly to with colleagues in LPS and also in the department to make sure that there's no duplicate payments, because this is taxpayers' money, and we have to ensure that it's our commitment to managing public money, as the document says, is invariant. So there's a necessary process that we need to go through, but we're working through that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I do appreciate it's public money, and I think the same people who are complaining about delays will ultimately complain if money was misappropriated in the long term. So I appreciate it's a balancing act. But what I can't get my head around, and what businesses can't, who are contacting me, is the lack of communication. I mean, the people who have applied for Part A and Part B, for the most part, as you will know, Paul, and this is not to get yourselves, it's just to get it off my chest on their behalf, are people who live on the breadline. They live week to week. So if you've got a girl who rents a chair in a salon and hasn't been able to do a single bit of hairdressing or nail bar work since November and hasn't had a payment in 6 weeks in the month after Christmas, I mean, we all got paid last week. I don't know about you, but I couldn't get by if my pay hadn't got in last week. So it just seems ridiculous that these people cannot get answers whenever they phone the helpline. Invest and I are doing the best with the limited resources they have, but even a communication from the department or from the minister to come out and say that we appreciate this is very difficult, this is why it is, but 50%, great for the 50% they've got it, but we're heading, it has been 6 weeks without a single penny, and when they phone up, they just get told we're working on it. I just find that very frustrating on their behalf, because they're coming to us. They're not. I don't think they're coming to the department for so much. They're coming to individual reps, and that's more just a gripe on their behalf. So hopefully the third payment, now that the iron out has been done with LPS, I'd love to think it will be instantaneous, given then that the next payment, because those that overlap has been done. There couldn't be any justification for a delay in the next payment, I wouldn't have thought. Can we get at least that guarantee?
For those that have been paid, so the population within the 50%, there's no reason why there'll be the top up until the 5th of March would cause delay. The challenge is, so for example, LPS will have paid a business that owns a hairdresser, but there may be an individual that rents a chair within that same premises. So what the database triggers that these look like the same people. So there's just steps that we have to go through to make sure that these are genuine claims and that there's not fraudulent activity. Okay. But I appreciate from the business perspective that's frustrating. Invest and I have contacted businesses just to give them an update. We'll take that feedback back and see what we can do to just give people the necessary assurances, or if there's information that we require for them, just at least let them know that there's specific information that can at least help us process their claims quicker than ordinarily would have been.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you passing that on, and if you could maybe pass it on to the Minister too, that a more in-depth, even a weekly sit rep, just to tell businesses what she's doing and why there are these delays would be really helpful. At least it would fill the void of no information. In
Okay.
terms of the self-employment scheme as well, have payments started to roll out on that? And I want to echo the chair's idea. I know you said that it is the most lucrative scheme anywhere in the UK, and I don't think I'm doubting that. What I would love to see with maybe an additional resource that is available is an extension of the criteria to try and capture more of the people that have missed out in that gap between the one from HMRC and the one that the department's rolling out. Is there any appetite within the department and the minister to do that, and just in terms of has a payment been made yet to those who have applied?
Yeah, so payments have rolled out. So there's around a third of the applicants, so 22% have been paid already. A further 12% will be paid by the end of this week. So the quantum there is in the region of 2.8 million. The challenge that the teams in Invest have found with this is the quality of the applications have made it difficult for them to pay as quickly as other schemes. We were hoping that the self-assessment deadline of the 31st of January would have helped with that, so people will have completed the necessary information and provided that to HMRC, and then they'd be able to provide at least some of that information to us to enable to process that. It's still the case, unfortunately, that there's multiple contacts required between an applicant sort of submitting an application and then the teams having to go through it and fill in the blanks. But Invest and I are working through that. I think there's possibly a role for the committee and members as well about how we can use you to communicate the information that's required. So when people can send in the information much quicker, we'll give that some thought and then provide, if you like, a short briefing pack for you to have when constituents or members of the public contact you.
Okay, thank you. And just in terms of the excluded NI paper, I did personally think there was quite a lot of good stuff in there. I appreciate you said that they recognised that an element had been covered in some of the support to date, but is there any plans to look more detailed into that, given they've done a lot of work themselves as an organisation to identify sections who have missed outs through no fault of their own? I'm just wondering what engagement has the department had with excluded NI, if not to use the current financial year, but at least a package starting early in the next financial year to maybe try and be creative in how it targets some extra resource to those who've missed out.
So we've received a paper, and it's part of the department's considerations. I think that so I mentioned earlier in the response to the chair, deliverability is a problem, certainly a challenge in this year, and anything that requires new schemes is complicated, and the 6 schemes that we've got up and running are all complicated, dealing with people that traditionally don't engage with certainly the department or government agencies, certainly in this part of the world at least. So it's that there are significant challenges that that any new scheme has to engage with, and more than happy to engage with excluded NI beyond the Twitter handle. I know so we've met with Brian Donaldson already. We talked through schemes, and he sent us the paper. If there's other people within that Twitter handle that you think is worth us speaking to, then
no problem.
More than happy to have the chat, definitely.
Okay, we'll pass that on. Just the final thing for me then is just in terms of the wet pubs scheme, is there any, first of all, are you content with the level of budget? I mean, I think some pubs are saying that it's almost an insult that the amount of money that potentially they're getting. I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration because you shouldn't look any gift horse in the mouth when it comes to government support, but given the massive overheads that some licensed premises have, was there any thought to extending that scheme financially, given that the current lockdown, for example, is extending and the support they can be getting? And also, in terms of the criteria, we've heard that the LRSS scheme, the Department of Finance has ruled out sports clubs who have bar facilities, which are wet bar facilities. Is there any notion to extend the criteria as well as the funding to extend that towards our sports clubs, given that they have missed out on all funding to date?
So the level of funding is for that, as Keith mentioned, is that specific period where business is required to close. So it's important to note that this sits alongside the LRSS that will continue to pay businesses that are closed, which obviously includes web pubs. The level of grant within that period is determined by the funding allocation that we've been given. So the scheme is designed to fit the funding envelope. I appreciate that that those businesses have had a particularly hard time, but we designed the scheme to fit the envelope, and I'm afraid that's the reality of what we've been asked to deliver. Keith, is there anything you want to add on? I think you mentioned sports clubs and bars within clubs.
No, Paul, nothing in particular. The bars within the clubs is an issue that the policy team are currently considering in terms of how that's categorised within the web pubs scheme, and there are a number of decisions that need to be made in terms of what the likely exclusions and inclusions will be there, and there are some challenges in doing that, but that is being looked at as a live issue at the minute. In addition, in terms of the payment, I would just offer the additional point that the payments are obviously in line with the payments that are being made under LRSS. That is a tiered payment structure, which is aligned with the NAV of the property. The NAV is obviously a proxy for what those fixed cost overheads are, and the scheme is designed to compensate for fixed cost overheads. For larger pubs with higher fixed cost overheads, they will of course be eligible for the large hospitality scheme, which will offer a more significant compensatory amount, reflecting the fact that those businesses will have been carrying higher costs.
Okay. I appreciate that update, Keith, and I appreciate that at least it's on the radar to look at sports clubs, because I think they do feel deeply let down by other sections of government, that they just keep falling between the cracks, and I think none of us will underplay the role that they play in the community and in the local economy. So I think hopefully that does get something that gets looked at. Chair, I'll leave it there. I could go on, but I'm sure other members want to come in. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Can I bring Sinead into the spotlight, please?
Good morning. Thank you, Paul, for that update, and really a thank you to John Stewart too, because he's raised quite a number of issues there that I think all members and elected representatives are experiencing, and those are the questions asked, and the fact that we have asked about additional schemes, the self-employment schemes and the web pubs, and I'm glad that there is an ongoing conversation now taking place in relation to sport clubs, etc. One of the things that I would really like to ask Paul if he could elaborate on the funding that was announced yesterday for student support. What does that entail, and what is how does that look in terms of a grant, or is it an enhancement of the current hardship fund?
Sinead, apologies, that's not my area in the department, I'm afraid. If would you? It's just I've not been working on that, I'm afraid, so I couldn't give you any more than's in the public domain. I'd be happy to take it back and ask officials to give you a bit more of an update on that. I'm sorry, I can't give you any more details on that.
Right, because I mean it was announced, but we really don't know how it's going to work in reality, so we can't really say too much about it. It's obviously welcome, but we need to know more about it. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Just I don't have the technical detail, I'm afraid, but I'll get the teams to write to the committee and provide information.
Okay.
Is it the just so I know, so I can let them know? Is it specifically the? I guess it's the nuts and bolts of how quickly the people.
The nuts and bolts, yeah. We need to know the detail of it. And the eligibility and the accessibility of it as well.
Apologies, I can't give you that, Sinead. Sorry.
Okay, not a problem. And then this is basically today. There was an article in the Belfast Tell in which Kevin Holland discussed that he has indicated that there has been a considerable interest in the dual market access for attracting companies to Northern Ireland. I'm just wondering from a strategic perspective within the department, and obviously you're strategy. Are you working towards in the department a strategy that will take advantage of our current position and attractiveness to both markets? And I'm thinking about Intertrade Ireland, and I'm thinking about Invest NI and how the department is going about that. I know it's not specifically just right in with your remit either, but obviously it has to be a strategy for the department going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned at the start about how huge amount of effort has gone into the delivery of 3 schemes already. There's 6 schemes live. So the purpose of that is to position the economy in a way that it can recover and pivot out of this. And economic recovery, hopefully, will be a conversation that we spend more time on rather than the life support schemes that are, absolutely necessary, but can't go on forever. I haven't seen Kevin's article, so I don't have the detail. But in terms of what we're doing within the department, it's working very closely with the EU exit division to understanding, there's an important balance and there's just a reality that we have to sort of accept, is that there are live issues that need to be addressed immediately. And only when we've sort of addressed them live issues can we then go and talk about, well, how do those sort of trading environments or the changes that have come as a result of the UK leaving the EU, what does that mean for Northern Ireland, and what does that mean for a strategic economic future? But yeah, it's they're 2 sides of the same coin, and that work is ongoing.
Okay, and I just want to echo also what John said. We are having real difficulties with communication with the department, and our businesses are as well. And that is something that really needs addressed. People are asking questions, businesses are asking questions. There's financial distress, frustration at not getting answers, and then maybe having standardised answers sent out. So really, communication is key here. I think if people are contacted and explain why there is a delay, then there will be much more, willing to wait on their money coming. But if they're getting absolutely no response, it's dreadful for them. And it's something that we have experienced from a representative office as well. And there's great frustration out there for no answers and no money coming quickly.
Yeah, it's similar to response to John is, as I understand it, Invest NI is contacted, so the CRBSS applicants. We'll take it away and see what more we can do. If that message isn't landing, or if there's more that we can do, absolutely, we'll give that some thought.
Thank you, Paul.
Paul, can I just come in on that particular point? And I suppose the frustration that was being communicated to us was that for most part it was applicants who had previously been received funding, and then they were waiting, and then they got an email from Invest saying, we're doing this cross-check with LPS around the LRSS, but they weren't actually involved in the LRSS, and I appreciate what you have previously said there around, there may have been a premises, but I guess there was a lack of understanding as to why they were able to get the first payment and had to wait now on the second payment. And I guess there was a level of frustration there because, as John rightly pointed out, that people are in very difficult financial circumstances. And I suppose it just didn't seem to completely add up in relation to why they had to wait. And we were getting quite a bit of contact around that.
Yeah, no, I've heard that, and we'll take that back and we'll see what we can do.
Okay. No, thank you. Can I bring in Stuart, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul, for what the information you've been giving us. And I think it is genuinely fair to say that while there's lots of frustration out there, and you've heard some of that from the members this morning, I think we do need just to stop for a second and actually say that civil servants and the department have done an amazing job, because you're working in these pandemic conditions as well, and you have done a good job, and it cannot be easy, and I need to place on record how difficult it must be for you and your officials to be working through this in all of these circumstances. So I think we just need to take a pause and say thank you for the work that's been done. Now, I want to move on then into just exactly where we are as we approach the end of the financial year. And you've said that it would be difficult, and in fact, I think the word you said was complicated, to roll out a new scheme as we approach the end of the financial year. But I know one of the members have made reference to information which Excluded NI have provided to you by way of potential use of funds, productive use of funds to the end of the financial year. Can I first of all ask you, are there any plans to top up existing schemes using the resource that remains available to the end of the financial year to allow either more people to apply who haven't actually got fitted into that envelope, or indeed just simply to expand the envelope and to give more funds to those that are already in those schemes? That's my first question. Maybe you'd like to answer that, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah, listen, thank you very much for that, Stuart. It's really gratefully received, the praise, and I'll make sure that the teams pick that up. It means a lot. Thank you. On the yeah, can we use existing schemes, and can we turn taps sort of the flow of funding through the existing schemes? Increase that flow to sort of either increase the level of compensation or maybe broaden the scope of the existing schemes. That's absolutely part of the conversations that we're having. So, that both at official and ministerial level, that's a live and active sort of discussion point. We're seized of the importance of providing as much support as possible to the business community, because if we don't want to get to the point at which we become the cover and have found that businesses aren't best placed to do that. So that's live. And an active area of policy development. The flow of that is what that looks like in practice is we provide advice to our minister. The minister then takes that to the executive for decisions. But it's happening in the department, absolutely.
Thank you. That's very welcome. I appreciate that all of the schemes are complex and difficult, and that you rightly have checks and cross checks to do. But why is it, for example, that a scheme like the travel agents support scheme has been handed to the Department of Finance when that's clearly the core business of your own department?
I'm not sure which scheme's that. So travel agents will be eligible for the LOSS because they're non-essential retail that's been required to close.
There's also a proposal to scope out a scheme to give them additional support, bearing in mind the loss of trade which has gone on over the period. But that's being worked on by Department of Finance. But I would have thought that travel agents were your core business.
I haven't seen that scheme, Stuart. So certainly, travel agents have been included in the in the list of issues which the sectors that have been particularly impacted. Absolutely, I think they are eligible for the LOSS because they're required to close. Those that aren't in premises, I think there's a bit of thinking we have to do about whether they're eligible for Part B. Arguably, they would be because they in no small part they're dependent upon the tourism sector. Hotels and bars being open in Northern Ireland, and therefore fit within that policy intent. But I haven't seen a specific scheme, but I'm happy to go back and sort of check through and see where that's if I've missed that.
Yeah, well, the finance minister said that, and I quote, in the absence of others, he was examining what support could be given to travel agents. Moving on, Paul, where are in relation scoping out the landscape, both now as we approach the financial year, to check, and again, I think this goes back to the document which you received from Excluded NI, to examine those that have missed out so far. Then where is that landscape and scoping document going, if there is one, in this early part of the next financial year? Clearly, the pandemic is just not going to end in the beginning of the new financial year, and it will continue on. So undoubtedly, there will have to be further funds put into schemes to deliver, perhaps into the early part of the summer. I'm not going to predict when we're going to start to see a return to business and all of that, but clearly this is not just going to stop because the financial year flips over in the next year. And maybe you could also start to indicate to us, and I appreciate There is a lot of hard work going on at the moment to work on these schemes. But could you maybe just set out for us a little of the prospects of the new financial year as hopefully we move away from these support schemes and what the future is going to start to look like? Because businesses, the likes that John Stewart referred to, the hairdresser who rents a single chair, to the travel agents, to big businesses, to the self-employed, these people will still be there when the pandemic starts to cool down and life starts to change again. But they're going to need ongoing, but perhaps different support into the future. And are you starting to scope some of that out?
Yeah, absolutely. The pandemic doesn't stop on the 31st of March. That's it's apparent. The level of support that's available into the next financial year is going to be dependent on the funding envelope, both in terms of the budget that's available, and I would expect decisions made in Horse Guards about how Treasury spends money in England and what the Barnett consequences of that are coming out. I don't have the detail on that, I'm afraid. I'm happy to go back and ask our finance colleagues. I don't think they have much sight on what the future looks like, but I expect we'll just have to react and the pandemic will change as well, so that the schemes that are currently in play may have to adapt to fit the problem that we're looking into. But that's, I think, certainly there's a strong working assumption that a level of support and intervention is going to have to continue, certainly in the short term. I think the challenge that we'll face is making sure that pivots, as I mentioned earlier, into recovery. So moving from sort of like the sustaining and the protecting type of support into much more strategic and demand stimulating support. So the high street support schemes, good example of that. So when shops are open, there will be a need for us to encourage people to spend local. These businesses have had a really hard time over what will be coming up to a year for some people. So those sort of demands, sort of stimulus packages, and then looking at areas of our economy where we have key strengths and looking and targeting strategic interventions in the areas of strength to make sure that where we have either we're global leaders or where we have a competitive advantage compared to other businesses in these islands, that we're supporting businesses sort of make up that lost ground or seize that competitive advantage. So that will be all part of a COVID recovery action plan, and the Minister bringing forward what recovery looks and feels like in the economy and what we're doing to support it, both as a department but also through our arms length bodies, of which Invest and I and Sinead mentioned Intertrade earlier on are going to be hugely important partners.
Yeah. Chair, thank you very much for all of that. Maybe just as I finish up this section, just to say that a lot of people believe that the committee has a wide range of influence, and it is our role both to hold the Minister and the Department to account. But at the end of the day, we don't make the decisions. Those decisions are made on the recommendations of civil to the Minister. And I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion out there by frustrated constituents who contact us about these schemes, and this is not passing the buck, but it is saying that the role for an individual member and the role for the committee is to challenge these, and we do that robustly, and that's the activity that we undertake, but the decision making is not ours. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stuart, and I think that's a point well made. Gordon, you're next in. Sorry.
Right, thanks, Chair, and thanks very much to Paul and Keith for all your work to date. It is appreciated. I must say, our office has continuously been in touch with both the Department of Economy and Invest NI, and we've got a lot of results for businesses. So we do appreciate the response that we do get, and I think we've made contacts with the right people, and as a result, we are getting answers for businesses. A couple of points. Just the BNP scheme is welcome, but there is one big issue, and that is self-catering. Some units do both. Some will do BNP, and you have the option of self-catering on the same site. I was somewhat upset when I realised that self-catering is not included, is my understanding. And I've spoken to some people in the department, and they're saying, but self-catering has been open. But, it may have been open, but we've had little or no tourists. you know, we've had little or no flights in and out of the country, there's been little or no movement. So I do think there is an argument there that self-catering needs to be compensated in some way.
So yeah, just so the specifics of the scheme in turn, and then the self-catering that I'll pick up later, is that the scheme was designed similar to the wet pubs. It's designed to support those that have been really quite significantly impacted, and that is the population that's in it. So that the B&Bs and the guest houses have had a really difficult time. Self-catering is slightly different. It's not to say that they have been insulated or not affected by the pandemic, but the period where the restrictions were relaxed, our assessment was that lots of people, albeit inbound tourism was significantly reduced, but there was lots of people that couldn't go abroad who decided to holiday at home, and because of the risk of the pandemic was still there, self-catering accommodation was particularly attractive. So in that sense, it's slightly different than the B&Bs, who the level of impact is different, and that's reflected in the scheme.
So are you reviewing that, or is there any intention to review the issue of the self-catering? They may have operated to a certain level, but it's nominal compared to what normal business was throughout the past year.
Yeah, no. Well, the conversation earlier with John and both Stuart is that as part of the advice that presented to the Minister on options that can in turn be put to the Executive for decisions on how funding can be allocated.
Okay, no, I will be taking that up with the Minister again. I have a constituent who has done a lot of lobbying.
It's just worth saying, I think self-catering are...
Sorry, Keith?
Sorry, I was just going to say, Gordon, the self-catering are eligible for the LRSS scheme. Just in case you were thinking there was no support there.
LRS, yeah. Yeah, because of loss of income, because of lack of business. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. The other point is, Megan, we have a constituent in North Down who has done considerable lobbying. He is a golf coach and runs a shop at the Royal Belfast Golf Club. He does not pay rates and he does not pay rent, but to date he has had no grant support, as he has no income, or relatively no income, because golf clubs are closed. What scheme is he possibly eligible for, or what should he consider applying for? He has talked to many officials. He's been in touch with this permanent secretary in the Department of Finance and many others, and yet the issue hasn't been resolved. Do you have any guidance or any thoughts that you could give him in relation to existing schemes, please?
It's good. If you send us, it's difficult to comment on specific cases without all the detail, but I'm more than happy to pick that up. In the schemes that we deliver, CRBSS Part B is specifically designed to support those businesses that are dependent on, or either providing services to, or dependent upon businesses that are named in the regulations being closed. So that it sounds at this level, it sounds like that might be suitable, but it's difficult to give you that level of confirmation without the full detail. But if you could send that in to us, we'll be happy to look into it.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. Right. Just the other point, and perhaps you cannot answer it. The student scheme. We welcome the progress on that. Just we have a lot of students that are from Northern Ireland or on the mainland studying. Are they going to be considered for the scheme or not? Have you any thoughts on that, or any aware?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Gordon. I'd have to get colleagues in skills to come back on the detail. It's not something that I've been working on. Okay. Apologies about that.
The last point is the hotel scheme, which we lobbied hard for. Is it open now? Is it up and running? I know it was approved, but is it up and running? Do you know?
Yeah, the scheme's open, so we've been in touch with key stakeholders to advise them the scheme, the payment rates, so that there's a processing that needs to go through, so that the guys are preparing, writing out to contacting businesses to request the necessary information. Speaking to the stakeholders, the feedback we got, that the knowledge that this is coming was really welcome, and give them at least some breathing space. But we're working hard and as quick as possible to get to the money out to them.
Good. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Gordon. Paul, can I just ask a question around that large hospitality tourism scheme? Obviously was very welcomed by the sectors, but it has been brought to our attention that cinemas and other events venues aren't eligible, and I suppose one of the reasons for putting that scheme in place was because those businesses missed out on the previous grants on the basis of their NAV being over 51k. And for some of these venues, that would have been the same situation. Is there any consideration being given to extending that out just to cover those venues that also have been very badly impacted, and similar to hotels, have went to some lengths to put in place measures, to protect staff and customers, and have unfortunately been closed for several weeks now?
Yeah, so the original policy intent was targeted at the large fixed costs of the large hotels. That's the reason why it was designed. There's a bit of work that we have to do to join up between ourselves, Department of Finance, and Department for Communities, to make sure, because we're all delivering schemes in the same space, to make sure there's a bit of overlap. But those conversations at official level are happening, just to make sure the advice we provide to ministers is sort of compatible and complementary, and that issue is included in those conversations.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. John O'Dowd, please, can we bring John into the spotlight?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Paul and Keith for their answers thus far. Paul, I just want to echo the Chair's comments and other members' comments around the wet pubs. I don't want to rehearse the answers because of the time the committee has, but I do want to echo them, and just for you to relay those back to the Minister, that scheme isn't responsive to the needs of clubs. The point I do want to labour on is the issue of payments not being received by businesses. And the term business isn't actually the right term. When you're talking about a young woman or a woman hiring a chair in a hairdresser's or in a beauty salon or wherever it may be, it's not a business, and not in the true sense of the word. They don't have assets. They don't have stockholders or stock shares or anything like that there. They're living week to week on the money they earn from hiring that chair. So business isn't the right term. And while I accept the need for public money to be protected, I can assure you, in the history of human adversity, there has never been a statue built to an accountant because they've done a great job at the accountancy during the time of crisis. What we need to do is get the money out the door and into the pockets of those people who haven't received payments since before Christmas. And I actually echo Stuart's comments, because this isn't a criticism of yourselves, your team, or InvestNI, and I'll tell you why. As Stuart has said, I put a query in yesterday to InvestNI, and I got a response back last night at 10 to 11, which shows to me the sort of hours people are working in your team and in other teams to try and deal with these issues. But the problem is this: they are processing bureaucracy. They are in a system which is measuring itself, monitoring itself, and being overly excessive in protecting public funds and missing the point. There are real people out there, like young women with young families, who have no money. So let's get the money out the door with the proviso that anyone who has fraudulently claimed will be come after. Anyone who is mistakenly paid will have to return that money. But the balance is wrong. The balance is wrong. People are, and I'm thinking of one particular case of making such as this at this moment in time, a young woman who has had no money since before Christmas and has a young family. So can we get the balance right?
John, just so useful to use that example. Does that constituent has that constituent applied for the self-employed income support scheme or the newly self-employed support scheme? Either
For
HMRC or for us.
CRBS scheme was approved early January. Now, there was some complications with the application, and I helped her through those, but approved early January, and has had no money. But had no money since the place was locked down. And I just want to make this point to you, Paul. Sorry for interrupting you. The email I got last night from Invest NI said that 2,000 payments have been made. I think earlier in your contribution you said about 50% of payments have been made. So if 2,000 people have been paid, and that's 50%, that means 2,000 haven't been paid. So my example is multiplied across all constituencies.
Yeah, and listen, I've heard that, and we'll go back. So there's 2 points, I think. One on communication, how we're explaining the process that people are in, and then the processing point, which also we'll listen to. Just on that, but you mentioned that the individual hasn't had any money. So while the CRBSS Part B may have not paid, I would have expected these people to have applied for one of the two self-employed support schemes that are available and designed to help people. So the CRBSS is designed to cover fixed costs rather than replace incomes. So they should be, given that the combination of those sort of schemes run from HMRC or the schemes run by us, there should be funding going into these individuals, particularly if they're self-employed.
Well, Paul, my comments about the system being overburdened in the wrong direction applies to all schemes. It applies to all the schemes, whether it's run from the Department of Economy or it's run from HMRC. This individual has had no money. That's an example, and there's multiple examples of that. We are in a crisis, which we're all living in, including yourself and your team, and you're all impacted by it. But as I said at the start, no one wins awards for being a great accountant in times of crisis. People remember, and quite rightly remember, those who get assistance out to those who need it.
Absolutely, and that's the intent of the scheme is to get money as much as possible. But there's lessons from the delivery of the 10,000 grant support scheme that we have to learn, and I'm quite confident that within the next 6 months I'll be back in front of this committee answering questions about fraud, risk, and error. And that's the operating environment that we work in, and there is a balance that we need to strike to make sure that our safeguarding public money, that duty is invariant. That's the word that the document uses, and that's the yardstick to which will be measured in the future. Within that, absolutely, I hear you, and I appreciate the difficulties that people are facing. We'll look at both comms and also the processing of the 50% in Part A that haven't been paid, or the larger number in Part B.
Paul, feel free, and I'm sure you will, keep the Hansard from this committee. And if I challenge you over you not sticking to accountancy rules, please read the Hansard out to me, and I'll happily backtrack. I suspect I will, because I said at the start of this crisis, rip up the rule book and get money out to people. And my thoughts on that are still the same. Of course, you have to protect public funds, and there has to be a balance, but the balance is in the wrong direction.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thanks, John. Can we bring Claire in, please?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Paul and Keith, for the contributions so far. I suppose I just want to pick up on John O'Dowd's point. And however well-intentioned it was, and I do believe it was, these people are businesses, and regardless of them being an independent business or a sole trader or self-employed, I don't think we should diminish the work that they have put in to get to that point. And the difficulty around the schemes is that they haven't entirely supported those small, medium enterprises, which makes up a significant part of Northern Ireland's economy. So I get what John's saying, and I agree to an extent that the way the grant supports have happened over this last year has been quite piecemeal, and it has gotten complicated, and it has meant that there is imbalance across the system, with some people, getting what they would have got had they been able to work and able to make that money, compared with people who haven't gotten anything. And I think certainly when we do reflect on this and we do evaluate the grant schemes over the course of the past year, we may decide that we should have went for a universal basic income that would have been probably more satisfactory in helping everyone, because there are still those people who are excluded. And indeed, we need to capture everyone, because it's as John Stewart said, as John O'Dowd said, this isn't a case where we can just not pay people, or we cannot give people money or financially support them, because they do have bills to pay, and that's not just within their business but also within their home life. And that must be really difficult, and people will be making big decisions on the basis of what has happened this past year and how they move forward. And from an economy perspective, that may mean that they have no longer any interest in being an entrepreneur. That may mean that they may feel it's too risky, not just for their business, but for their actual day-to-day life. And I think that's something the Department for the Economy really needs to reflect on, because, amongst all of this, we are seeing adverts and schemes about encouraging people to be entrepreneurs. Why would you? Given that some people haven't been able to access support when it's been required. And yes, we have to have a consideration for those individuals, but we also have to have a consideration for the wider Northern Ireland economy, and how we ensure that stays stimulated, so that we can protect jobs, we can ensure that people are not going into the unemployment queue. So I think. I think evaluation will be a really important point, and Paul, interestingly enough as well, you said that in 6 months' time we'll be asking you about all the various fraud measures and all of that. Why wait 6 months? Look, there are things that we can put in place. One of the questions I was going to ask anyway is that, has the department put preventative measures in place? What is your fraud prevention strategy generally? What's standard whenever you're putting out these grants? Is there a disclaimer that in the event that a grant is paid out wrongly, you may have to pay this back? Because we've seen that already, where businesses have been paid grants wrongly. And in my understanding, no protection was put in place. So those businesses don't necessarily have to give that back from a legal standpoint. And that concerns me. That's irresponsible. To me, that's fairly standard whenever we're giving out public funding. So I'd be keen to hear your thoughts in relation to, I suppose, evaluation, and if we were to reflect and do this again, would it be better to potentially look at a universal basic income rather than the piecemeal kind of approach that we've taken in the past year? The other point I would ask in relation to this and the people who continue to be excluded, last year, nearly a year ago, I had made a suggestion that we open up some sort of communication channel so that those people who were excluded could put forward their details and let you know why they were excluded, or why they fell through the cracks of the other schemes. Is that still something that we should be doing, just to try and identify the people out there and see how we can capture everyone? Because I don't think it's a difficult thing. I'm pretty sure if people haven't received any money, they'd be quite keen to tell you that. So is there a way that we can somehow try and, I suppose, get that list of people and just understand why they've been excluded? And again, that will help with evaluation in the future as well. Maybe if I leave it there and we can follow up.
Yeah, so absolutely, the schemes include quite a lot of detail on sort of the mitigations to fraud and error. So there's, you mentioned the specific point of whether we can claw money back. That's included within the schemes. Separately, there's within the department, there's a team that we've established to assess this and to do those post-project evaluations to make sure that the scheme's delivered what we set out to do, and the fraud and error rate within the schemes was not excessive. And if we do identify issues, that the steps been taken to sort of address those. So that's part of the scheme. If you're interested in what that looks like from a governance level, we're more than happy to share that. On evaluation, I haven't stopped to think about too much, I'm afraid. So I haven't thought about whether a universal basic income was would have been a better way to do this. Although I look forward to the conversation about that whenever that's appropriate. And then on a portal, so I guess there's lots of stakeholder groups out there that sort of represents different people. So we excluded NI is the obvious one, but there's we get representations from the likes of the Federation of Small Businesses, the other trade bodies. So they, I think, are effectively capturing the people that you talk about. I can't think of anybody that we're not aware of.
I suppose that's the difficulty. If you can't think of anyone, it doesn't mean they don't exist. And yes, we can assume that they're captured by various, interest groups or lobby groups. But I'm receiving a considerable amount of correspondence continued, as I'm sure is every MLA across Northern Ireland. And for me, it would be useful if there was some sort of communication channel that we can pass that on, rather than the blanket response of these are the various schemes or go to nibusiness.info to find out. They've already done that. We've already done that. We have nowhere to go insofar as those people who are not necessarily represented or maybe just aren't aware that these groups exist. Because these groups, because of the situation as well, essentially exist on social media. They essentially exist, on very specific channels, and we can't assume that everybody has access to that. And they're doing a fab job, might I add. But to me, it's not insurmountable to ask that those other businesses or to pass on their details or just share that information, because for them and every MLA said it up to this point, they're just not being supported, and we need to find a way in supporting them.
Yeah, so I'd be interested to know if there are people that genuinely have got nothing. It'd be interesting to know who they are.
Okay, well, maybe if you want to, I can give them your email address, but I wouldn't want to do that, Paul. Maybe so if if you want to set up something else, some sort of portal as suggested by myself here, or an email address, then we can certainly forward and signpost them on to you. I've no difficulty there.
So I guess is where the schemes have, so NI Business Info you've mentioned gives other schemes. Invest NI is unusual in the delivery of the schemes, and that it has a helpline for people to get in touch and contact. So there's ways for people to get in touch with us to talk through either applications that they're thinking of or to get updates. So I'm not sure what a portal would do to add to that, apart from create lots of correspondence.
Well, it's really to that there are still people who continue to be excluded. So if that's the case, then let's find out why. And it's not about talking about the schemes that people can apply for or will get automatically. It's about looking for those individuals who haven't. Like I'm sensing that you want to learn or understand who is excluded and why they're being excluded. Then maybe we just ask them.
Yeah. Okay. We'll give some. Okay, let's think about that. We'll come back to you about how we sort of reach out over and above sort of relationships with existing representative bodies and the contact points that we have already.
Yeah. Okay. Challenges. I suppose the other question is that how is the department and people like yourself, how are you engaging with businesses to understand the very specific challenges that they are facing now? Because it is over and above, the schemes. The schemes to an extent will help them cover their overheads. But are there other issues which that maybe we need to be fed through to the department, even just to anticipate further support, whether that's financial or other? How is the department speaking and engaging with various businesses, whether it's small businesses or bigger businesses?
So I guess there's a blend, isn't there? There's just talks to our whole stakeholder engagement strategy across the department at different levels, which takes the form of either ministerial-led contacts. We have the economic advisory group that provides advice. Outside of that, there's sort of separate groups that sort of bring business interests together, whether that's specifically on Brexit or, for example, the Matrix panel that advises on those sort of that frontier part of the economy. And then there's the relationships that we have with the trade bodies and how they sort of have a much wider reach than we can, and they synthesise the issues that their members are facing and then bring them to us. And then there's a discrete bit of work that happens in department where we proactively reach out to parts of the economy where we think we need more information, whether that's particularly over how sort of COVID and Brexit issues collide and compound on each other.
Sure. Okay. No, that's good to hear, and certainly, I would always advocate to strengthen those types of connections and even reach out more than the usual kind of suspects insofar as these areas. And I know you're here to speak of the COVID grants and all of that, and I know you spoke yesterday in relation to Brexit, but there are issues which are feeding into that. The COVID Brexit thing is huge, and they can't be seen in isolation, particularly for businesses. So, but that's great. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Claire. Can we bring Christopher into the spotlight, please? Is he talking?
Christopher, you're in the spotlight. I think you're on mute. Can't he? Oh. Oh.
He's still in the spotlight. Oh, he's back.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Oh, good. Excellent. Thank you. This is me and technology. Technology reached its peak with a frozen pizza as far as I was concerned. And just a few questions. Firstly, when this situation comes to an end in terms of subventions into the economy, what is the estimation of the number of jobs that are likely to go?
I haven't seen that recently, Christopher, I'm afraid. I don't know whether there's a national level or whether there's anything that our economists have done on a regional level, but we can think about that. I can ask that question and come back to you. I don't have that with me, I'm afraid.
Okay, I just think because, unemployment is obviously a tragedy for any person that it befalls them, but I think we need to be realistic and honest. There are a lot of jobs that are presently being sustained through government intervention and borrowing, that once that borrowing ceases, those jobs will go. And I'm just wondering what, if we could get basically an anticipated number and what planning is being done by the department in order to stimulate job creation and growth. Because when I hear members talking about the need to get money out the door, and absolutely agree with that, we must always be mindful of the fact that this is borrowed money and it's going to have to be paid back. And the only way it can be paid back is if we have a productive economy with people at work who are paying their taxes and enabling government to pay for the things that we have undertaken. So with that in mind, do we know what the total level of subvention that has been pumped into the economy via these schemes is?
Yeah, so our contribute. So just go back to your earlier point. I understand it a bit clearer now. So HMRC published the number of people in Northern Ireland that are currently furloughed. So we can provide you that information. I think that might be useful for that. I think a lot will depend on the future of the furlough scheme. So the media were reporting sort of announcements from the Treasury number 10, possibly towards the end of this month, on what recovery looks like. So I think that will be a key factor in the point that you make as furlough ends. What does the future look like, and what does that transition, if it's a managed transition, hopefully, sort of support businesses adapt and adjust to that COVID recovery piece. So we can provide certainly the information that we hold on the number of furlough and any published work that we've done on the future of the economy. Our contributions are the support schemes that we run have provided 365 million into the economy. That's our contribution. I don't know. I don't have a NI-wide figure, but again, we can look into that. But sort of, if that's available on the total number of grant schemes that have been delivered over the past 10 or so months.
Okay. One of the things that I think has caused a lot of confusion, and you mentioned it earlier, is the sort of crossover that there is between economy, finance, I suppose communities, and even to an extent infrastructure in relation to some of these issues. Can I ask which department is giving a lead? Mr. Dixon raised the issue of travel agents. It is my understanding that the Department for Finance is taking the lead on that issue. Is that the case?
Mr. Dixon mentioned the scheme, which I hadn't seen Minister Murphy's comments, so I'd have to look into that. So they're eligible for, travel agents will be closed, so they're eligible for the LOSS, which is led by obviously Department of Finance and delivered through LPS. And then if it's outbound tourism, traditionally it's obviously, as a department, we're interested in people coming to Northern Ireland, spend money in Northern Ireland, rather than booking holidays and leaving Northern Ireland. But, I don't know if that answers your query.
I think travel agents have obviously faced a unique set of challenges in terms of just the longer this has gone on, the more of a hammering they have taken. One area as well that has taken a similar degree of hammering is that of coach operators and taxi drivers. And I'm just wondering, could you speak to that in terms of the level of support that the department, I suppose in terms of taxi drivers working in conjunction with infrastructure, that the department is offering to those who are working in the taxi driving sector and the coach operating sector. I have a coach operator literally around the corner from my constituency office in Sandy Row. You might know Alan's, who run the tours and stuff, and do the causeway, and actually up here to the estate as well. And they are taking an absolute beating at the minute. I'm just wondering what level of support the department is providing to those who work in that sector.
So coach operators should be included within the CRBSS scheme. So the business that you mentioned should be eligible for that. Taxis is scheme delivered by colleagues in Department for Infrastructure.
Okay, and just finally, I think someone raised the issue of cinemas and the threat to cinemas. I mean, I think Northern Ireland now, we only have one independently owned cinema in operation. The rest are part of larger chains, but even the larger chains now are talking about no return to cinemas once this is over. Cinemas, theatres, public spaces, these are things that on the face of it may not seem important to purely the economy, but they add amenity to people's lives, and they add amenity to the community as well as providing employment. I'm just wondering what interventions are being considered specifically for those sectors, rather than simply applying for existing schemes, specifically for cinemas and theatres, to enable them to get back up and running. I mean, obviously in my constituency, there's a couple of theatres as well as plenty of cinemas, but I'm just keen to know if there will be a specific and targeted intervention into, I suppose you could call it, the arts sector, because throughout this, the inability to meet, the inability to go to see live entertainment, that is affecting not only the people who are employed in those areas, but also it is affecting the amenity and the general well-being of the people. So I'm just wondering, do you know if there's anything coming down the line which is a specific targeted intervention to assist the arts sector at this time?
Yeah, so I wholly recognise your point about sort of like the place that these sort of businesses and institutions play in building an ecosystem that builds a successful and competitive economy. Absolutely. I think the arts sector there's a specific scheme that's run by the Department of Communities that targets the groups that you've identified.
Okay, that's grand. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christopher. Paul, can I just ask one quick question around the High Street voucher scheme? I noted that there was 93 million of a reduced requirement and there had been 95 allocated. Was there money spent in terms of the development of the scheme?
Yeah, so there's some procurement costs that we can spend in year, that's the 2 million that's withheld for this year.
And is that something then that will be carried over in terms of that work already done?
You mean so the 2 million we spent this year, so it will be carried over. That's the split between the 95 that was allocated, and then the reduced requirement is the 93, and then the 2 million is the procurement steps that we can take immediately to ensure that the scheme's ready when the public health advice permits and the shops are open.
Yeah, no. When I said carried over, I meant that work's already done, so it doesn't need done again.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I understand your point. Yeah, so it's so for example, it's specific procurement around how we sort of get people to register for the cards and match data to ensure they are who they say they are. Can be done now.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just to sum up from members' contributions, I think that if there is a takeaway message, it's to try as best as possible to meet the needs of those who have still been missed out in terms of support, and hopefully the points that have been made will be relayed back to the Minister in terms of trying to make best use of money that it remains available at the centre, and hopefully we'll see some further developments in that space. And just to reiterate the comments that other members have made, we do recognise the significant effort that has been put in to delivering schemes both by the Department of Economy and also by LPS in particular, and we do appreciate, as John has highlighted, the extra hours that officials are also having to work at this time, and we do pass on our thanks for that.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, so do we want to do a wrap up, or will we do it after?
I can give you a very quick set of readouts, Chair, where a couple of individual cases we're sending direct to Paul via the Dallo. Also, we are looking at getting more information on just exactly how the department puts disclaimers into the schemes in terms of if this has been paid you incorrectly, there's a system for getting it back. Also seeking an update on the work of the EAG, the Economic Advisory Group, asking about what's going to be happening post-furlough in terms of the numbers that are already on furlough who are likely to perhaps not have a job to go to. What's going to happen there? How will that be worked? What sort of schemes might be put in place for that? And also clarifying further on what exactly is going on around travel agents. There seems to be, there's been a lot of discussion around, but we're not entirely sure what exactly has happened, so trying to get better detail on that, Chair. And anything else, when we go back, we'll pick up on anything else, but those are the ones that we've noted so far.
Okay. Are members content with those?
Great, yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on then to item number 5, which is the briefing from the Health and Safety Executive. There is a clerk's memo at page 56 of your pack, and there is a briefing paper from the HSE at page 58. The committee agreed to seek the briefing from the HSE as a result of the increase in its workload due to COVID and changes following the end of the EU exit transition period. So can we please bring into the spotlight Robert Kidd, CEO of the HSE, Dr. Brian Monson, Deputy Chief Executive, Nikki Monson, Grade 6, Louis Byrne, Grade 6, and Kevin Neeson, Principal Health and Safety Inspector at the HSE. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, good morning, Chair. Robert Kidd, can you hear me okay?
Hiya, Robert. If I hand over to yourself to make a bit of an opening statement, and then we'll open up to members.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm conscious, obviously, things are running behind. I plan to speak for about 10 minutes with committee's permission.
Yep, no, that's fine.
If possible.
Yep.
So, good morning, everyone. Can I begin by thanking the Chair, the Deputy Chair, and the members of the committee for the invitation to meet with you today to update you on our work activities over the last 6 months. Can I also thank those members who have contacted us throughout the pandemic in an effort to resolve issues brought to their attention by their constituents. I'm joined today by the team that have already been introduced. Brian is responsible for Field Operations Division. Nikki is responsible for Specialist Services Division. Kevin is responsible for Services Division. And Louis is responsible for the EU-NI protocol work. So by way of a very brief introduction, HSE-NI is a small non-departmental public body. We have a staff complement of 108 at present. This includes an inspectorate staff of 41, which also includes 8 trainees and 4 part-time staff. In addition, we have 4 compliance officers who work in specific areas. Our responsibility for workplace safety covers areas including agriculture and food, manufacturing, utilities and docks, construction, extractive industries and the waste recycling sector, explosives used in mining and quarrying, major hazards, which are typically the coma sites, so control of major accident hazard sites, gas, transport, public sector, occupational health and hygiene, including the mental well-being at work advisory service, major investigations, support and coordination of our trainees through the training programme, EU exit for chemicals and product safety and the associated legislation in relation to both of those, our operational support team, which is call handlers and dealing with email for notifications in our complaints team. And then we have a small function covering complaints, IT, finance, premises and information management. For some time now, we've been running with vacancies in our inspectorate numbers, and this has been exacerbated recently, where we've lost experienced inspectorate staff, both through NICS promotion and retirements, etc. The very acute inspectorate staffing situation has been put under considerable strain since the start of the pandemic. To put the inspectorate resourcing in context, at times over the past 10 months, we've had as few as 28 staff who could deploy in the field. I wish to put on record that our sponsor department has always been and continues to be hugely supportive of our position, but it takes time to secure funding, recruit and train inspectors, and this can often be a process taking 3 or sometimes more years. It goes without saying that our work activity has continued to be fundamentally impacted by the COVID pandemic, and I'm not trying to claim to be special in this respect, as I cannot think of a sector which has not been forced to adapt as a direct result of the necessary restrictions coming out of the pandemic response. It is fair to say that every sector we interact with has come through a period of turmoil to restructure their workplace in order to not only continue to function, but also to keep their workforce safe. COVID has meant we have not delivered the full range of events and promotional activities as we would in a normal year. It has overtaken our operational activity, but as you will hear, this has not meant that we have totally abandoned our normal work activity. We recognise that there is an ongoing need to focus on those high-risk work activities that can lead to fatalities and serious injury, as well as those that are a major cause of ill health in the workplace. Much has been learned since the onset of the first lockdown in March 2020. The involvement of HSE-NI in partnership with industry representatives, company managers, trade unions, health and safety managers in workplaces has enabled us to take the public health guidance and seek to apply it in conjunction with a workplace risk assessment to devise plans which enable essential businesses to continue to operate safely. Building on the principles of hands, face, space, we have integrated other mitigations developed by public health specialists into the advice and instructions have been issued, including screening, cohorting of staff, one-way systems, staggered start and finish times, expansion into additional space where possible, staff working back-to-back or side-by-side rather than face-to-face, cleaning regimes, use of fogging technologies, dedicating certain tools or equipment to specific individuals, appointing COVID safety marshals on the shop floor, staggering break times, limiting numbers using changing facilities or other amenities. This list has built up quickly over time, providing a menu of measures suitable for different settings and workplaces. In more recent months, as more became known about the virus, we introduced how ventilation can be used to reduce the likelihood of COVID spread in a workplace. HSE-NI work practices continued to react and evolve in light of emerging public health guidance, assisting businesses develop simple solutions that can be implemented quickly, whilst more sustainable solutions can be considered for the longer term. The policing of COVID in the workplace was and continues to be challenging. The decisions my staff have taken and continue to take could have both health and economic implications. COVID was something very new, and the measures to mitigate against it were driven by public health, not traditional health and safety. That said, I am proud that my staff have adapted and learned quickly to provide the best service we can to both employers and employees. HSENI does not have policy responsibility for COVID, as it is a public health matter, and as you're aware, it is community transmissible and not purely passed on via the work setting. Workplaces being an extension of the community can, despite best efforts, see positive cases presenting. Employers in general have made sterling efforts to act quickly in this respect. However, the challenge of complying with public health guidance is definitely more difficult in some industry sectors compared to others. We have a close working relationship with Public Health Agency, and together we have investigated more than 150 workplace cluster incident reports. In these cases, it is rarely possible to establish categorically the source of transmission, but the key factor is containment and the prevention of further spread. Our role is to re-examine the workplace measures and to seek to identify any possible shortcomings which can be addressed, provide advice and, where necessary, instruction to businesses. It is unfortunate that many of the problems we see are down to behaviour and a disregard for the advice that exists to keep us all safe, whether from employers or employees. We've heard anecdotal reports of staff attending work when symptomatic or even having tested positive. Similarly, we have heard reports of staff being pressurised to turn up for work when an individual believes they could work from home or be furloughed. We see workers disregarding advice to socially distance or wash hands. Like a failure to wear a mask in a shop, these situations can happen in an instant and are impossible for any regulator to police effectively. The employer's approach, the employee's attitude, and peer pressure from colleagues are much more effective tools in achieving sustained compliance. In all aspects of life, where compliance can be achieved willingly rather than by enforcement, we are more likely to see a position that can be maintained in the longer term. Of course, as well as our COVID compliance and advisory work, we have sought to conduct checks on other matters while we have had staff on site. As part of our ongoing evaluation of the deployment of staff to sites, we've taken the decision to deploy in pairs for operational reasons to ensure staff safety, and as the role of inspection has become much more demanding. In addition, where we've had to deploy to large sites as a result of complaints or COVID cluster reports, we've seen cases where we had to deploy multiple staff over days to ensure matters are resolved to our satisfaction and to seek to avoid enforcement notices, which could have significant economic impact on a business in what is already a very challenging time for the economy. With the news of the new strains or variants of COVID and evidence that the new strain is up to 70% more transmissible, we took the decision to reduce deployment of staff to only high-risk COVID-related issues and the most serious incidents and fatalities. This was to both ensure the safety of our own staff, but also to prevent our people becoming carriers of the virus between sites. Of course, we take every precaution when staff are on site, and the benefit of our 10 months of learning is that we've had no staff who have contracted COVID as a result of work-related activity. Unfortunately, during the reporting year, since the start of April 2020, unconnected to COVID, we have seen 9 fatalities in the first 3 quarters of the year, which is up from 7 in the same period in the previous year. Agriculture continues to be the highest cause of workplace deaths, with 3 fatalities, and construction and manufacturing both behind with 2 each, and 1 in healthcare and 1 in electricity supply sectors. Excuse me. Working at height without adequate fall protection measures continues to be a major concern, and in agriculture and construction, the issue is around individuals seeking to save time and money and exposing themselves to risk, which can often have tragic consequences. In manufacturing and construction, the other risks are vehicle and machinery related. The need to ensure appropriate vehicle-pedestrian segregation is critically important, as often the visibility immediately around large plant is not ideal. While we investigate many fatalities and serious incidents, it goes without saying that education and mitigation of risk is infinitely preferable to dealing with the aftermath where the system has broken down, leading to a life-changing injury or worse. The human cost, the economic cost, and the social costs are hugely significant. Families left without a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a grandparent, or family members having to watch a previously active person learn to live with life-changing injuries, such as the loss of a limb or other debilitating injuries, are a sad reality. There is also the impact on colleagues struggling to go back to work, having witnessed a co-worker killed or seriously injured in the workplace. The role of HSENI will continue to send out messages to seek to find new ways of getting to those who have thus far chosen to ignore the warnings. One of the most difficult things for me as the Chief Executive of HSENI is to hear the background to a fatality or a major injury and know that in all probability it could have been prevented. The modern workplace can mitigate the risks and provide the necessary equipment or systems of work to ensure that the activities can be undertaken in a manner whereby risk is managed to an acceptable level. On the positive side, we have seen serious injuries reported fall from 17 to 6, which may in part be due to some businesses having been closed or operating on a reduced capacity during the pandemic period, so we must not become complacent on those figures. The number of interactions we've had with clients has risen by around 140%, going from 9,150 to 13,781 in the 9 months from April to December 2020. All complaints and incidents are initially triaged and information gathered to assess what is the most appropriate course of action. In some cases, issues can be quickly addressed by communicating with the complainant or the company involved, whilst in other cases, site visits will be required. In all, there were 1,341 complaint investigations, which resulted in 460 site visits during the period. Just over half were not upheld. That was 52%. 41% were fully or partially upheld, and the balance of 6% are still ongoing or unresolved at this time. Site visits have been reduced as a result of COVID. In areas such as agriculture, we suspended routine farm inspection to enable the agri-food team to focus on food production and food processing plants. This has been a demanding area from the start, as it was one of the key essential industries that operated throughout the pandemic, and so they were trial sites for many of the solutions which are now common across industry and retail sites. Many events have been delivered in other ways, such as video conferencing, webinars, social media, and website materials. We've continued to seek to deliver our messages on vitally important areas, such as mental health and well-being in the workplace, as this is very much an area of concern at this time. People's mental health generally is an issue that they struggle to cope with during the pressures of lockdown. Fears of job security, potential isolation for those working alone at home, fears for family members, pressures of homeschooling are just some of the many things which people have to cope with. We've also sought to continue to raise the profile of issues such as carbon monoxide poisoning, and we're working hard on an asbestos campaign. Members will also have seen our continued campaign adverts through the Farm Safety Partnership, and the messages continue to be televised and put out through other media. Falls from height continues to be a concern, and I've already touched on that as well, both in the agriculture and the construction sectors. And we've worked very closely with the Construction Industry Training Board and the Construction Employers Federation for some of the construction incident campaigns. Moving on to EU exit work, HSENI has responsibility for chemicals, product safety, and the underpinning legislation for both of these under Annex 2 of the Northern Ireland Protocol. This is fundamentally new work coming to the organisation and will require the recruitment of a number of new staff in order to carry out the work. We are currently working to recruit 11 new staff to this area and hope to have the first of these staff in place by April-May, with a proposed operational readiness date of September. The scoping and planning of this work has been challenging, given the uncertainties that persisted throughout 2020. While some issues remain unresolved for our work in this area and we face some considerable challenges, we now have a clearer vision of where we need to go and indeed how we will get there. We are heavily reliant on ongoing and future support from UK government departments in respect of all of our protocol work. In terms of planning going forward, we had drawn up a revised operating plan, and I believe committee members will have seen this late last year. What you will see is that it highlights some of the difficult decisions we've had to take in terms of skewing resources to the most pressing of our activities, namely COVID-related pressures. The senior management team continue to keep this situation under constant review and will make adjustments to our work planning as demands allow. I believe that the communications with a wide range of partner organisations has been hugely improved as relationships have been forged upon learning together, sharing best practice, promoting what works for employer and employee, and an understanding that concerns can be voiced without fear of recrimination, or where such fears exist, there are anonymous reporting mechanisms which protect the individual employee. HSENI has been given a prominence as a result of the pandemic that we probably never had at any time before, and I believe we are not seen just as an enforcer, but also as an educator, an advisor, and a body which exists to support the economy, both from the employee and the employer's perspective. I hope that our briefing and these opening remarks have provided some insight for the committee into the efforts that we've made to address workplace challenges as a result of the pandemic. Can I thank you all for your patience? We will be happy to try and answer any of the questions that the committee would have for us.
Thank you very much for that overview, Robert. It's really useful to get the background and the detail in respect of the work that has been going on over the past few months. As you've highlighted, many of us will likely have been in contact with you over that period and appreciate the responses that we have had. Just I suppose in relation to, first of all, the COVID work, and you will appreciate that when people are contacting us, it's very often with genuine concerns, and they are, you know, very worried about their own personal safety or that of their workmates. Just in relation to the visits that are conducted in respect of complaints, are there any unannounced visits currently being carried out where there are, I suppose, persistent or numerous contacts in relation to a particular workplace?
Yes, Chair, we've had a number. In fact, most of our visits will still be carried out in an unannounced manner. So where we have information provided as by way of a complaint, we will do our investigations. I mentioned a triage process. So we'll gather the information. If it's a larger employee, typically we will have multiple complaints. So the triage system allows us to build a bit of a picture, and then the teams will typically arrive on site unannounced, which allows them to obviously see things just exactly as they are. And in some cases where inspectors have continued concerns or reservations, we have conducted further follow-up, again, unannounced visits, sometimes as close as a week or 10 days after the initial visit.
Okay, no, appreciate that. And is there contact made with the businesses in advance of unannounced inspections? So during that triage process, is there contact made with the businesses during that will give them, I suppose, some indication that they're likely to receive a visit?
It will depend, Chair, I suppose, on the nature of the complaint. In some cases, when our teams are handling the complaints, they may be able to gather some information by liaising with the company. So it's difficult to say just exactly, as you say, there may be an indication, but certainly in some cases, yes, part of handling the complaint will involve speaking to the company, and whether that's to management or to a health and safety manager within the company.
Okay. No, I do appreciate that there are different circumstances, and in some instances an unannounced visit may be the way to go. I note the comments that you made around the close working relationship with the PHA, and I guess that again is something in terms of contact that is made with us, where there are concerns about outbreak or transmission within in workplaces. Can you maybe just talk a wee bit more about what is being done in respect of that? And I'm thinking not just the likes of factories, but also, you know, construction sites and those type of businesses where social distancing can be very difficult to actually implement because of the nature of the work.
Chair, if you don't mind, I'm going to hand that one and let Brian take that as the lead.
So yes, we've dealt with over 150 clusters which have been reported.
Sorry, we're having a wee bit of interference. I'm not sure why. Oh, yep, that's stopped.
Is that any better?
Yep.
Good.
So we've had over 150 cluster reports which we've received from PHA and dealt with. And in each of those cases, again, there's an assessment made based on previous history with the company and the type of cluster and looking at the contact tracing. And in many instances, then we will carry out site inspections. The majority of those site inspections will be, again, unannounced unless there's a good reason not to. And we will look at the suite of controls which are available and assess whether the appropriate controls, and what we talk about is defence and depth here, a number of controls which are all applied together. So each of those will be specific to a particular company or sector. So what works for construction, as you said, may be very different to what we might see in a food production site. Inspectors then provide feedback to PHA, and in relation to some of the larger outbreaks, will be involved in the incident management team, outbreak control, providing support to PHA, providing input both initially in terms of the risk assessment and also later to see that the measures that are being recommended have been appropriately put in place. And those are quite intensive. They take a lot of staff time, but we feel they're very worthwhile in terms of reducing the risk to people at some of these sites where outbreaks are occurring.
Yeah. Can I just ask, and maybe it's for yourself as well, Brian, in relation to providing advice and guidance to specific sectors, does that come via yourselves or is that jointly with PHA?
Again, there's a mix. Sometimes the advice is coming jointly from PHA and ourselves. Sometimes what we do is take the advice which is generally available, public health advice, and adapt that, working with companies to identify solutions which work for them.
Okay. And I suppose I mentioned the construction industry, and because there have been some concerns, you know, for example, people travelling in work vans and things like that. And is that something that you have had contact around, or is that something that has been proactively communicated by yourselves to employers?
Again, across a number of construction would be one, but there is proactive communication, usually with the trade bodies and directly with employers where we have interactions with them. And some of the areas that we're dealing with, for example, sharing of cars, car sharing and the like, whilst at work, that's something where we will have some degree of input to. However, some of the difficulties we find are private car sharing to and from work, for example. And in those cases, we're working with PHA and their community health teams to get messages out to individuals, and also working directly with employers to ensure that the appropriate advice is available to people.
All right, no, thank you for that. Can I just ask a question? You've highlighted in your briefing, Robert, around recruitment issues and the need to recruit additional staff, particularly in relation to EU exit issues. And just also note that there was an underspend in relation to recruitment from the HSE. Have there been some challenges in respect of that?
The underspend, Chair, was in relation to vacancy management. We had anticipated having a number of vacancies filled earlier in the year, and because of the ongoing challenges just with getting some of those vacancies filled, we surrendered an amount of money. One of the difficulties we have as an organisation is that we can't readily pull staff directly off standard NICS promotion lists. Committee members will appreciate that a lot of our staff are specialist grades. So we have our inspector grades who come in as trainee inspectors, usually with a science, technology, engineering or maths degree, and then they go through a regulatory training programme diploma, which is a postgraduate level training programme, which takes usually somewhere between 2 and 3 years because it's classroom based, but also they have to build an evidential portfolio. In some of our other areas, we have compliance officers and higher scientific officers. So again, those are not just standard grades, and typically we're looking for people with particular skills. So at the moment we have an HSO vacancy, and that HSO would be working very specifically in our lab, and one of the key functions would be around asbestos sampling. So we're looking for people with very specific skill sets. So that's where some of our delays in recruitment have come. We're also, I mentioned the EU staffing, and one of the challenges up until very late last year was trying to actually ascertain what the work programme would be for those individuals. So until we knew what the activities were going to be, it made it very difficult to specify the grades of people and the type of work they were going to be doing, which is why we're behind on the recruitment in that area.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I'm going to bring in some other members for questions. Can I bring in Stuart, please?
Thank you. And thank the President what you gave to us, grounded read the work that the Health and Safety Executive is doing, a work that perhaps has gone unsung but is entirely important during this COVID pandemic crisis that we're going in. Can I ask you maybe just expand a little more for us in relation to where you are with regards to Brexit, the need for additional staff, the type of roles that they will be taking in respect of that, and are you starting to see any hint of divergence? We're just into the Brexit situation, so the UK and Northern Ireland are continuing to follow EU rules around health and safety in the laws in the main. But are we now starting to see divergence, and what will that start to throw up for us?
Louis, are you happy to take that one?
Yep. Yes, I can take that one. Chair, I think, can you hear me okay? Yep.
And yep.
Okay, I think I got most of the question there. So as set out in the paper, broadly, we have two sort of operational areas in the Northern Ireland Protocol and the EU work. The first and probably the easiest to explain is chemicals. And the second is product safety, and mainly products that are going to be used in the workplace. There's all the product directives, and two of the chemical ones have market surveillance work, so that's what we will be doing. Specifically in relation to divergence, we have not seen a divergence yet, but divergence could come, and that would be divergence obviously between you. So, for example, you could potentially see it in some chemicals where GB would authorise some, for example, biocidal products that the EU wouldn't, and vice versa, or GB might get ahead of the EU or vice versa. So we haven't seen any divergence yet, but certainly divergence does cause us some concern as to how we keep track of that. Because basically we historically have worked very closely with GB colleagues, so they would be set up to have quite extensive research facilities and policy divisions, etc. So that would all be developed over there, and then we would basically follow suit. To stand those functions up in a small area like Northern Ireland would be quite an undertaking. and you couldn't be guaranteed that if you stood all those functions up, that you would have the volume of work coming into those functions. So it probably wouldn't be worth doing it. Hence, we have the ongoing dependence on our GB colleagues, mainly the Health and Safety Executive, who are providing the chemical regime in GB. Now, I have to say that we have had really brilliant support from the Health and Safety Executive and other UK government departments in achieving this. And they are providing a lot of the technical support on chemicals, etc. And I think the other part of the question was a quick broad outline of what our people would be doing in relation to EU work. First and foremost, it's not port-based or it's not point of entry-based work. The work on chemicals and machinery would be basically working with employers at their premises, at their factories, at their workplaces, to assist them to make sure that the chemicals that they would be bringing in or the products that they would be bringing in for use at their work basically complied with the directives. It would be a mixture of desk-based work, so it would be some paper checking, and it would also be a mixture of some site-based work, verifying that both the chemicals and the product were in compliance. And if you look at chemicals, for example, the purpose of it is to make sure ultimately that the end user has got the sufficient information and equipment and experience which comes with the chemicals in order to allow them to use them safely and to remain safe themselves and to protect the environment. So in terms of numbers of staff, it's an increase in our headcount of 11 people. If that gives you a flavour of the regimes that we're covering, the activities and the staffing.
Thank you, Stuart. Gordon?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much, Robert, and your staff for your presentation. Just a couple of quick points. We do recognise the work you've done with COVID, and certainly in the Northtown area you got involved with a number of factories and call centres where we had issues. Initially, I suppose it's a year ago now, time does fly, but there was a number of issues there. Are you still working with the local councils on issues like that in relation to the management of COVID and making sure the workplace is compliant? And the other points I'll go through quickly. What about your role in relation to the high street, the supermarkets we hear a lot about? Do you have a role in that, making sure that they are compliant? I know the councils are involved to some level. And what monitoring and compliance is done in relation to that? Finally, my last point is something I brought up before with yourselves some years ago. It was about farm safety. It's a big issue. It comes up every year. And sadly, as you've said, there were 9 fatalities last year. And I do think more should be done in trying to encourage risk assessments on farms. The Chair talked about building sites, and I think a lot has been done to improve safety on building sites. It's certainly much more visible. When you go around the country, you see building sites are now fenced off. There's signage there. There's warnings for people to keep out, and if you're a visitor, it's very clear what you have to report. So the sites are well managed. But I think more needs to be done to make farms safer places. They need to be safe for the families that are there. They need to be safe for contractors and young people that come in to work during the summer especially. What is done to make sure that they are competent and know what they're doing and that they're safe in what they're doing. Farms are certainly under a lot of pressure. The weather can be against them, and when it comes to the summer season, things just move very quickly. But the risk is high, and I think more needs to be done. And I appreciate the work that has been done. You've run different schemes. The SAFE programme and so on has been run. It's about increasing awareness, but I think more needs to be done to try and make farms safer places for everyone, not just the farmers, but those that I've just mentioned. And there are a lot of visitors to farms as well, sales reps and people delivering goods and so on and so forth. So the risks are high, and I think I would appreciate your feedback on the various points, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Gordon, for the questions. To take your questions in order, working with councils, we do have a very close relationship with councils, and we'll pass information between each other. There's a fairly clear distinction between what HSENI has responsibility for and what the councils have responsibility for. But as part of our working, we do have a liaison officer within our team who is actually a former member of council staff. So we have a very strong connection and we work very closely with the councils. In terms of our role in the high street, HSENI has really no role in the high street. You mentioned things like supermarkets. Yeah. So we have no involvement in high street activities such as retail, office, leisure, restaurants, cafes. Those are all overseen by the councils and their environmental health officers. So we don't get involved in those activities.
At all? You're not involved at all?
No.
Right, thank you. Yeah.
On the farm safety one, I'll say a few things if I may, and then I'll invite Brian to come in. The farm safety issue continues to be a major challenge for us, and I mentioned that we've had 3 fatalities in farming. I think one of the biggest issues for us is how we get the messages across to people. And obviously, members will be aware of our SAFE campaign, so we focus on slurry, animals, falls from height, and use of equipment. One of the biggest challenges, and looking back, and I don't want to obviously get into specifics of incidents, but one of the most common accidents that we're seeing is falls from heights. So where a farmer maybe wakes up one morning, there's been a bit of a storm, and he has roof damage on a barn. Instead of getting a contractor in with the appropriate equipment, the farmer will venture up onto the roof himself, and obviously working at that height over what is probably a concrete silo floor. If there is a fall, it's a very unforgiving environment. So we're doing a lot of work in terms of trying to get those messages out there, but it's very challenging. And I think we would probably say the same with self-employed farmers and small operators in the construction market. It's about keeping costs down, Gordon. People don't think about the risks. They think about how much is it going to cost me if I have to get scaffolding in, or if I have to bring in a mobile elevated working platform. So they take the risk, and unfortunately, without fall prevention, that's when they put themselves at extreme risk and danger. And I'll ask Brian if he wants to add to that, if you don't mind.
Right, thank you.
Yes, just a couple of things, Gordon, thanks. Appreciate the interest in this, because farm safety has been one of the key areas that we've been pushing on, and I've been involved in now for 12 or 13 years. As Robert has said, 3 fatalities this year, tragic fatalities. And when you speak to family members and that, you realise what we're really talking about here. Now that, in context, when Farm Safety Partnership was set up back in 2012, 2013, we were seeing 11 and 12 farm fatalities a year. So the effort has paid off, and the work that's being done has paid off. A couple of specifics you mentioned, one around risk assessment. We work closely with colleagues in DERA, and now in relation to grant schemes, there are requirements for farmers to carry out and submit risk assessments before they're able to apply for grants. And we have seen thousands of risk assessments being supplied as part of that scheme. And anecdotally on the ground, we are finding that people in doing those risk assessments are identifying improvements that they can make and acting on that. And that goes along with research that we've done around the SAFE campaign, the TV and radio adverts, and the newest campaign, which has started to roll out now, which is around safety essentials and is targeting the absolute basics. So that work will continue. In relation to young people, it's been a very challenging time with COVID. Normally, we would have had links with over 100 primary schools on a rotational basis. So every year we would visit 100 or so primary schools and get a farm safety message. We would also run a colouring in competition with schools and the like, primarily about educating primary school children and also working with young farmers. That's been difficult this year, so we moved to an online colouring competition which was very, very well received, and we got a lot of entries from it. From that competition, the winning entries were turned into a calendar with key safety messages, and that calendar has been distributed to 42,000 rural families to continue to keep the message front and centre that farm safety is important, whether you are a 2 or 3 year old or whether you're a 90-year-old. Look, we continue to work hard on this, and we continue to have support from our partners in the Farm Safety Partnership. And we appreciate the interest that the committee has in this also.
Thanks very much. Thank you. That's good detailed answers there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Gordon. Can we bring John O'Dowd into the spotlight, please?
Thank you, Chair. And just to echo Gordon's comments about farm safety, and again, I think it's a sobering figure, 9 deaths in workplace last year. In the middle of COVID and what's going on, it's worth remembering that workplaces can be very dangerous places for other reasons as well. So it's a very, very sobering figure. That I want to thank you as an organisation for your work thus far, and in particular, I found you very responsive to inquiries and complaints I have made to you on behalf of workers in different places. You have always responded, and at times in a quite detailed response to me. So I want to thank you for that. And you treasure that, because sometimes you also have to criticise, but on this occasion, I certainly didn't. I want to just touch on the Southern Trust Health Area has the highest rate of COVID infection in the north, and ABC Council from day to day can be at the top of that list in terms of COVID infections. I attended a Southern Trust public meeting last week, and one of the issues that was raised was that there is a high rate of infection among the Black, Asian, minority ethnic community. And that's not to blame that community for that infection rate. I don't want anybody to suggest that's the case. The reality is that when you look at many of their working conditions and their living conditions and the communication barriers to them, it presents certain difficulties for sections of that community. And in terms of workplaces then, many of the food processing plants that would exist in that area have a high percentage of minority ethnic communities in them. And I know I raised one plant with you last Friday, and in fairness, you came back to me quite quickly on it and offered me also a contact for over the weekend if there was any other areas of concern for it. So again, well done. But is there any specific work you're doing in relation to protecting the minority ethnic community in workplaces?
John, firstly, thank you for your kind remarks. And certainly I can only praise the team for the work that they've done, because the number of queries that they've handled, and not just from elected representatives, but from employees. And obviously when people raise concerns, they want to hear back as quickly as possible, because those are very genuine concerns. And people do fear for their health and for the health of their families. And we try to take all of those and deal with them as quickly as possible. In relation to the Black and ethnic minority communities, I've actually been involved myself. Just at the end of last week, I was in discussions with the Department of Finance and with Executive Office colleagues, and they're looking at some issues around targeting very specific issues. And one of the things that was mentioned was communication issues. So where somebody may not have English as their first language, how we can get those messages across and ensure that those people actually have an understanding of what they need to do to keep themselves safe. So we know that a lot of the materials from Public Health Agency and other bodies has been translated into multiple languages. But as you rightly say, the people that we're getting at are potentially those in the lower earning brackets. They may not have access to online media, etc. So it's about how we use some of the different groups within the volunteering community sector to ensure that we get those messages out. And obviously, members will be aware of things like the pictograms, so the hands, face, space, trying to use pictures and graphics as well as text. But that's something which is being actively looked at the moment as to how we can get at various ethnic groups within specific communities where we have, as I say, any group. It doesn't necessarily have to be Black or Asian. It can be groups where certainly English is not their first spoken language. They may speak English, but they may struggle to read a document in English, and particularly if we're talking about medical terms or trying to give technical advice. You also mentioned the issue about working conditions, and we've already touched on living conditions and the issues of commuting. As Brian said, we don't have control over people travelling together in a private vehicle. And again, unfortunately, because of income pressures, there is a lot of carpooling within certain workplaces that we're seeing. And it's something which I raised actually at that forum. And I don't know whether it's something we can readily tackle. I know, for example, of a couple of companies who previously would have ran minibuses because they collected their own staff because of shift working times, etc. And obviously the minibuses had to be taken off the road because of COVID. So it's a very challenging issue and one which we are aware of. But in terms of how we address it, I'm not quite so sure. We're trying to get the messages out there. We're trying to explain about how people should travel, obviously keeping cars ventilated, etc. It's not an easy time of the year to drive to work with your windows down, but keeping people ventilated and wearing face coverings, again, at all times if they are travelling together in vehicles. Similarly, people living in houses of multiple occupancy. You know, we've seen situations or heard of situations where people are living in fairly cramped conditions, you know, probably what we would term as overcrowding of a property. So people are sharing the living space, the cooking space, the bathrooms, and all of those things can lead to community transmission as much as workplace transmission.
Can I just ask a related point? You mentioned it in your opening remarks. If an employee is told by their employer to turn up to work even though they're showing symptoms of COVID-19, where is the responsibility laid, or who is the authority to which that should be reported to?
We are referring those people to the Labour Relations Agency because, again, until they're actually in the workplace, and for our inspectors, it's very difficult to make that decision. We don't have the vares to decide whether someone should or should not be in the workplace. So if someone feels that they're being put under undue pressure to present to the workplace, it becomes an employment rights or a labour relations issue, and they should report it to them.
If there was a trend identified within a workplace, could you then intervene in the sense that it is a health and safety issue?
Sorry, I'll just pass over. Brian's indicating their job.
If part of any company's controls in terms of COVID must be about ensuring that where possible, COVID's not brought into the workplace. So for all of the sites that the inspectors visit, they will look to see that the company has a procedure which identifies that staff should not be attending work if they either have a positive COVID test or they have COVID-like symptoms until they've had a test. They must not attend work if they have been identified as a close contact, and that's part of the risk control. So in those circumstances, if we find that there's evidence that those controls are either not in place or not being implemented, then the company will be instructed to address that issue and change that issue immediately. And again, if they fail to do that repeatedly, then we would consider enforcement notices. We haven't been in that situation yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. Sinead, can we bring Sinead into the spotlight, please?
Thank you very much for your presentation, and it was very detailed. I was just wondering, you talked quite a bit about the collaboration that you've had with PHA and also with the councils and the advisory role that you've had, and obviously your service provision has expanded significantly because of the pandemic. But have you seen a greater increase in businesses actually being proactive and contacting you as a body to go into their workplace and give them advice and guidance on how that they could do their business better and protect their employees?
Do you want to take that one, Brian?
Yep. So the number of advisory calls that we get has increased over the period. The majority of those have been relatively simple and straightforward. So staff have been able to provide advice by telephone. We developed template risk assessments to help businesses identify both the risks and potential mitigations that they can put in place. And we have run a number, along with partner organisations such as the Northern Ireland Safety Group, with some local chambers of commerce and the like. We have run webinars dealing specifically with COVID issues and COVID control measures that can be put in place. So yes, we have. The amount of advisory work that we're doing has increased, and that's been critical, because I think it's only fair to say, there are rogue employers out there, but the vast majority of employers want to do the right thing. They want their staff to be safe. They want the business to be able to operate safely and efficiently, and not end up having people either ill or the business closed down as a result of an outbreak. So yes.
Thank you, Brian, for that. And also, can I add my congratulations to the HSE as well. I've been very impressed with their responses to some of the issues that I have raised within my office, particularly in relation to meat plants. And they've been very quick, responsive, and I regard what they did they did it with due care and diligence. So thank you to your team.
Thank you, Sinead. Robert and everybody else, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. It has been really useful, and I'm sure we'll be wanting to be in touch with you again quite soon in relation to COVID and also Brexit issues as that continues to unfold. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, members. Okay, is there anything we need to follow?
I'll go back and just see if we can get a rolling check on the recruitment of the staff and them getting into post, and whether there's any further need. I can recall, Chair, a while back, there was a bid in for staff, but it does look like the staffing that was asked for has been allocated. It's just as was being clarified there, they're all specialist posts, so the training and the recruitment's just a bit more difficult. Okay. We'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, so we're moving on then to item number 6, which is matters arising. At page 77 of your pack, there is a response from the Minister regarding applying for COVID restriction business support schemes. Sorry, I can just ask members to mute their devices when they're not speaking again. Thank you. So the response has indicated that Invest NI officials have not received any feedback to indicate that applicants are unclear as to the purpose of the accountant's letter, or that they're unclear that the letters are optional. I might disagree with that. In addition, officials are also unaware of any feedback or evidence to suggest that the optional accountant's letters are acting as a barrier to applications. I know that I have made Invest aware that it wasn't entirely clear that the letters were optional, so I'm sure other members have as well. Unless any members have other comments to make, that's to note.
Great.
Thank you.
Page 78 then, there's a departmental response regarding a query from the Finance Committee on the COVID-19 business support schemes operated by DFE. So the response includes an outline of all the schemes, followed by a table giving an overview of the schemes. So again, it's to note, and we've already had some discussion in relation to that.
Great.
Page 85, then there's a departmental response regarding COVID support schemes. At our meeting on the 13th of January, members received an oral briefing on January monitoring, and I agreed to ask the department for a number of requests in relation to the COVID support schemes. So again, it's to note unless there's any comments. Okay.
Great, yeah.
Page 90 then, there's a Hansard of a briefing to the Infrastructure Committee from the Retail Consortium, Logistics UK and the Road Haulage Association concerning issues facing the freight and haulage sector due to the end of the transition period and the outworkings of the TCA and where it interacts with the protocol. So it has been provided for members' information and is to note at this stage, and I'm sure we'll be bringing it back for further consideration.
Yeah, I think, Chair, it would be good if we had a bit of a discussion on it maybe, and one or two representatives to come and talk to us about it.
Chair, I know representatives have been in front of both the ERA and the infrastructure committees, and their groups we're in regular contact with, so we'll sort that out.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you.
So moving on then to page 114, there's correspondence from the ERA committee regarding CAFRE students. So we had written to DERA seeking an update on the impact of COVID-19 on student mental health, welfare and wellbeing at the college. The response covers issues such as accommodation, remote learning, enrolment and the Student Hardship Fund, and are similar to the issues that have been raised by other student representatives to the committee. So it's for noting, and Peter, perhaps if we could ask the department for either a written or oral briefing in relation to the student support funding that was announced yesterday evening, and the Minister had previously indicated she was looking at further support, so it would be useful to get some overview of that. And I know I did a meeting with some students locally last night myself, and mental health is an issue that continues to be raised, and I know members have raised it previously, but I think it would be good to get some update in respect to that.
Chair, it might be useful. I've had some discussions with the universities, and what they've flagged up is a need for budgeting in the next financial year. What they're concerned about is not just the mental health of students that are currently within the universities and colleges and so on, but they're worried about students coming into university come September who won't have sat A-levels, will have very much been out of the loop in terms of having been at school, and they're really quite concerned that they're going to need an awful lot of additional staff to support those students. Just, with very simple things of formal exam settings, how that change between GCSE that comes at A-level, for preparation for university, that a lot of young people would have missed out on that. So it's maybe just something that the committee needs to keep on the radar at the minute, is there will be a need for that kind of support coming into the new financial year, kind of going towards September.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, I agree with Peter's remarks, looking towards the future, which is coming at us very quickly. But I also think, and I note your comments, our students need to understand how to apply for this additional Student Hardship Fund. And I welcome the fact that the Minister has said previously that it has to be more accessible than it was previously. But we need to know the criteria. Students need to know the criteria on how to apply for it. And I think then there's an onus on the universities and the further education colleges to reassure students and their families that the loops you had to jump through before will be removed, and that students will be able to get access to the much needed finance.
Yep.
We'll follow through on that, Chair.
Thanks, John. Okay, so moving on then to page 117, there's a response there from Stranmillis University College Students' Union, and similarly it's an update on the impact of COVID on student mental health, welfare and wellbeing, and similarly covers issues already highlighted by student representatives. We have already corresponded with the Minister and Executive on this, so we can forward that response on as well. And again, it's to note, and I think the committee would want to put on record its appreciation to the student representatives for how amenable they have been in terms of getting us information, and also to the UCU, who have communicated with us on a number of occasions in the university. So it has really helped us in terms of our responses. So are members content to note?
Great, yeah.
Okay, so page 119 then, there is a response from the Association of British Insurers about COVID claims. Members will be aware of the FCA's court action in respect of business interruption in insurance, and the response from ABI indicates that insurers have already started to settle some of the valid claims, and insurers will be working through cases affected by the Supreme Court judgment as a priority. The ABI has also set out clear principles online which provide details on how businesses with valid claims can expect their insurers to respond. So Peter has, on behalf of the committee, been engaging with stakeholders to seek their feedback on their experiences in respect of this. So it's to note for now, and we will bring back those responses in due course. Okay.
Good, right, thank you.
Then at page 7 of your table papers, there's a departmental response regarding issues raised by University and College Union. The Department's response highlights that the Norse universities are autonomous institutions and are responsible for ensuring compliance with all public health guidance in relation to the current COVID-19 pandemic, including the determination of employee working arrangements. The Queen's believes that in order to meet basic student needs, limited staff are required on site, but they have introduced mitigations such as rotas. Queen's do not have any staff on site who do not want to be due to the current circumstances. In relation to the arrival of international students from China, Queen's has raised the matter with the Executive Office Task Force and were advised that the new regulations could not prevent the flight as long as the public health guidance was adhered to. Before boarding the flight, students had to provide evidence of a negative COVID-19 test and not be displaying any symptoms. So are members content to forward this response on to UCU?
Great, yeah.
Sure, we'll bring back whatever their comment is.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's reassuring about the flight. I certainly don't believe it was public knowledge that, you know, and not that I'm aware that I've seen it in the media, but at least there were controls there in place, and I think that's to be welcomed.
We got some clarifications, I think, in last week's pack. It was in the record of decision, so we didn't get to discuss it in committee, and I'd spoken to Queen's, and we went through a list of what they'd done. That's fairly well reflected in that response last week, and it might just be worth us putting that in the pack again next week for matters rising, because it does set out specifics. That's a more general response, but it does set out specifics of all the process that they went through and who they spoke to, who they contacted, including the airports and so on. It just, I think it's helpful for members to be able to see and understand just exactly what was done.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on then to 6.9, at page 12 of the table papers, there is correspondence from John Darcy, who is Director of Open University, John took place in the skills micro-inquiry last Thursday and has provided this further briefing paper following the inquiry. So the paper outlines skills needed, access and quality, funding, lifelong learning and the key strengths of the Open University. So this paper will also be included in the committee's final report. Peter, is there anything you want to add to in relation to the when we're expecting?
Yeah, Chair, we're working on the drawing together the themes for the special report at the minute. We've had a few organisations have sent us that kind of follow-up as well, which has been really useful. Obviously, we had a note taker in each of the breakout rooms, so we're hoping we'll capture everything. We will hopefully bring that back in the next couple of weeks. As I say, we'll start with themes and then we'll have a full report for members to discuss, hopefully agree on, and then we can bring the debate to the plenary.
Thank you, Peter. So moving on then, item number 7, there's a departmental written briefing and the review of level 4 and level 5 provision, and HE and FE, a review of existing policy. So there is a written briefing at page 122 of your packs. The department has undertaken a review covering the following work streams. Define level 4 and 5 and HE and FE proposition, level 4 and 5 qualifications, foundation degree policy, alignment with the department's other provision, pathways and progression routes, funding and MASN, the role of universities in level 4 and 5 provision, and the role of FE colleges in level 6 provision, and finally retention and achievement levels at level 4 and 5 and in HE and FE. So the report will be published next year. So members, we will try and seek a briefing on that, and I think John's looking to come in on it there.
Yeah, Chair. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. I think this could be a very interesting piece of work if handled properly and new ideas are brought to fruition as a result of it. COVID-19 is going to change many aspects of our society and maybe accelerate some of those which were already taking place. And I think it is apt that the department is going to take an in-depth look at university and college education and the purpose of it and the outcomes for students. And so I actually look forward to this piece of work, and if we can get a presentation from the department in the near future, I think it would be very useful.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, then moving on to item number 8, which is correspondence. At page 126 of your pack, there's correspondence from the Committee of the Executive Office regarding the terms of reference for the committee overseeing EU exit matters. This replaces the Executive Subcommittee on Brexit, so it's to note unless members have any comments.
Agreed.
Okay. Page 135, there's correspondence from the Committee for Infrastructure regarding the impact of Brexit on the haulage and retail sectors. The Committee for Infrastructure had a briefing from the Retail Consortium, Logistics UK and the Road Haulage Association, and we already had answered in matters arising. So the issues that they've highlighted include grouping and export health certificates, customs agents, empty loads, the Trader Support Service, delays at border posts and the impact of COVID-19. The committee have also included possible mitigations which could be utilised. So it's to note unless members have any specific comments. But Peter, we had agreed, member, to look at the briefing with TSS.
Yes, so we're still working on that, Chair. The ERA committee have approached, and we're looking at how we do that jointly. So it can be done as one session rather than kind of having to bring them in more than once. So we continue to work on that, and when the response to this comes through, it'll come via this committee as well.
Okay, so moving on then to 8.3, at page 139, there's correspondence from Lord Kinnell, who's chair of the Lords EU Affairs Committee, to Rebecca Pow regarding EM 1394-420, a proposal for regulation on batteries and waste batteries. Lord Kinnell states that his committee's primary focus is on the implications of the regulation for here in the north, given its direct application under the protocol. He asked a number of questions in relation to this, and just to inform members, I've been invited to meet with the Lords EU Committee on the 22nd of February, along with the chairs of ERA Finance and Executive Office Committees. So if members are content that I will attend that, and we will note Lord Kinnell's letter for now.
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you.
So moving on then to 8.4, at page 142 of your pack, there's correspondence from an individual regarding support for small tourism and accommodation, and it's in relation to the issue that Gordon raised earlier on around self-catering premises being excluded from the recently announced B&B guest house and guest accommodation grant. So if members are content, we'll forward that on to the department, and Gordon has already raised this issue too.
Right, thank you, agreed.
Page 143 then of the pack, there's correspondence from ARC 21 to executive ministers regarding green growth. ARC 21, as members will know, are a waste and resource management body who believe that waste can make a significant contribution to the successful delivery of green growth. They highlight issues such as net zero, clean energies, the circular economy and sustainability and protecting the environment. So it's to note unless members have any comments. I thought it was quite an interesting letter, and it might be worth exploring some more detail at some stage.
Those are some of the issues we're picking up with the department around the energy strategy. This is probably a good point to ask members if they're content that we bring back those themes for discussion. I'm conscious of the fact that the energy strategy is probably forthcoming in the next couple of months. And I think it might just be useful to bring the issues back to committee for a bit of a further discussion, so that members can be refreshed on those themes before we see something from the department. Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, then moving on, page 146, there is the 21st report of the Examiner Statutory Rules. So to note unless members have any comments.
Agreed.
Page 17 of table papers then is the Assembly statement from Minister Weir regarding alternative awarding arrangements for CA qualifications in summer 2021. There will be a 5-stage process for awarding GCSEs, AS and A-levels this year, and members will likely have heard this statement earlier this week, but the 5 stages will be training, support and guidance provided by CA, provision of assessment resources and evidence gathering process, determining grades and internal moderation of those grades, external review of evidence, and then the distribution of grades and post-award review. So that is for members to note unless there's any comments. Peter, it might be worth communicating with universities at some stage in relation to how they view this process and how they will be responding in terms of making offers and that process.
What process? Yeah, Chair, we follow up on that.
At page 45 then of table papers, there's correspondence from CBI containing its COVID emergency working group notes from its meeting held on the 27th of January. So that's to note unless any members have any comments.
Agreed.
Page 50 then of table papers, there is correspondence from Rani regarding an addendum to the 2020 consultation response. Rani submitted a comprehensive response to the Department's consultation on the non-domestic RHI scheme. Rani highlights that further research has revealed that the cost base for the comparison used in the 2020 non-domestic tariff review calculation has used data relating to domestic fuel volumes and costs, including VAT. So it's to note unless members have any comments. And it might be a useful point to seek an update in relation to the RHI scheme.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then, page 76 of table paper is the ISNI Assembly Committee report. So again, that's to note unless members have any comments.
Agreed.
Okay. Any other business? Claire has just indicated. So Claire, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, earlier this week, members will note that Ulster University made the decision to move health sciences to Magee. I just want to say that I have no difficulty with the growth of Magee, and indeed it will be good for the Northwest and for Derry. But I think naturally, as a MLA for East London Derry, where we have the Korean campus of Ulster University, I am concerned that the previous Vice-Chancellor had promised places at Korean in respect of health sciences, and I'm just concerned that we are diminishing Korean in itself. And I think it might be worth it if the committee was in agreement to seek the Ulster's continued commitment for Korean, and how he intend, what are the Vice Chancellor's plans in respect of Korean, and indeed the wider Ulster University campuses across Northern Ireland. For me, this isn't the old Korean Magee argument. I reject that entirely, but it is a concern that Korean, its infrastructure, its tourism, and all of that has been built up around the fact that we have a university in Korean, and I think it's important that we ensure moving forward, in order to protect wider aspects of the North Coast, that we seek assurances from the university that they are committed to Korean, and indeed Magee and every other campus across Northern Ireland.
Sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to echo in part at least what Claire was alluding to, we did have a meeting with the Vice Chancellor at UU to discuss this, because part of that move is also courses from the Jordanstown campus, which is, I guess, in a different situation, because the university needs to set out what the future plans is. So some of those health courses are moving to the Belfast campus as well. So perhaps this is the time for us to get a chancellor to come and do a start take with us both campus resource.
John O'Dowd is looking in there as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to engage with Ulster University on that basis, that we're looking at how we develop further higher education across the North in a fair and equitable fashion, which wasn't always the case in the past, because universities are not only places of learning, but as Claire has pointed out, they're also economic drivers as well. So if we can, as I say, happy to engage with Ulster University on the basis that we're looking at how we expand a fair and equitable distribution of university places across the North.
Yep, no, I'm content with that approach, and Peter's going to organise that communication, and obviously from a constituency perspective as well, it's something I have engaged with the university around, and know that there has been commitment given to the multi-campus approach, but I do share your points there, John, as well in respect of that. So Peter, if you can get that organised. Claire, did you want to raise some other issue as well?
Yeah, Chair, if you don't mind. I would say every MLA is getting correspondence in relation to the issues around the Northern Ireland Protocol and the East-West arrangements. I suppose given that a lot of that's coming from local businesses and their concerns in getting supplies from GB, is there an opportunity to speak with either the department or even write to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister to see if they are advocating to try and, I suppose, get rid of these issues and see if there's a way forward in helping businesses here in Northern Ireland, get the supplies that they have been used to. I suppose the difficulty is that ultimately it's a UK Gov issue. However, I do think there is strength, certainly if it was coming from the Northern Ireland Executive, whether it's the First and Deputy First Minister or indeed the Economy Minister, that they advocate around trying to mitigate against the concerns that are being raised with me and I'm sure other MLAs.
Okay, and I think Sinead's looking in there as well. Right, go ahead, Sinead.
Sorry, I'm happy to come in on both issues raised by Claire, but it would be remiss of me since I raise McGee very regularly at the committee, not to say that we welcomed the news this week of the placement of the Allied Health Sciences to McGee, and it will really support our ambition within the city deal, and it connects very, very well with the medical school. And I appreciate Claire raising that it's not an either or, and certainly I would embrace a discussion around higher education and on how we deliver higher education here in Northern Ireland. We have real issues with the MAS and CAP, and there is a commitment in the New Decade New Deal to have 10,000 students at the McGee campus, and that requires a discussion about how we deliver higher education throughout Northern Ireland. So I definitely welcome that discussion, and I can feel Claire's pain. We have been working on this very loudly, campaigning for 53 years, and we've made a small step, but we're still one of the smallest campuses in the whole of the island of Ireland. So whilst we've made a small step this week, we have larger steps to make in the greater scheme of things in the next few years, and we will keep up the momentum. But certainly happy to discuss higher education because the executive is committed to 10,000 students in McGee. So I need to see a plan how they're going to do that very, very, very soon.
Yeah. So go ahead, Stuart. Stuart on mute.
Yes, he's on. Stuart, you're muted. Oh, he's off now.
Yeah, it doesn't want to unmute.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It was in relation to Claire's second piece, and to be very welcome that we, both Minister and alright to the OFM DFM with regards to where we are in relation to East-West trade. A lot of the items were on the original list are now starting to be ticked off the list, which is good. Perhaps it would be helpful if we, for example, we saw this week groupage is now being resolved, and it might be useful if we got a checklist just to see what remains to be done to improve that. I think there are some encouraging signs that improvement is starting to click. One area which I think we're doing, and I've written to the Minister, is to examine how we can develop the whole package for Northern Ireland where it is ideally placed both in East-West and North-South and for EU and GB trading opportunities, and that we should be seeing what plans the Executive and the Minister have got that and in GB.
Thanks, Stuart. John O'Dowd's looking in there as well.
Just on the East-West trade issues, happy to engage in that. But I have to say, my inbox is not full of concerns from businesses, families, or workers in relation to the protocol. My inbox is full of concerns from businesses, families, and workers about not getting grants from various government departments, about insecurity around their jobs, and a whole range of other things. So yes, if there are real issues, then let's deal with them. And we also, in terms of the protocol, then have to look at, and I raised this, beginning to get the days, maybe at yesterday's meeting with officials around the opportunities the protocol presents for businesses here, for potential businesses here to create jobs and employment, and also in terms of Intertrade Ireland, support Intertrade Ireland and other bodies around giving businesses the support they require when necessary or if needed to find sources of materials and goods elsewhere.
Yeah, thanks, John. And just to highlight to members, we are getting a briefing from Invest NI and Intertrade hopefully the week after next. So those are some of the issues that we can pick up with them in respect of that. And I also think that in relation to the points that Stuart has made about the issues that have been resolved to date, so happy to communicate what Claire has outlined in relation to where there may be some ongoing teething issues and what has been resolved.
Yeah, Chair, we can ask that.
Okay, so then that is us, unless the members have anything else. So agenda item number 10 is the date, time and place of the next meeting, which is next Wednesday here in room 30 at 10 a.m. So thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.